Welcome to the Shebeen, where we drink Irish whiskey, discuss Irish whiskey, and celebrate Irish whiskey together every Sunday at 7 o'clock Eastern, midnight Irish time. Looking forward to having a few drops of whiskey with you tonight and talking all about the developments in the wonderful world of Irish whiskey. How's it going, everybody? You're all very welcome to the Shebeen, our, I suppose, reinvented lock-in live stream every Sunday night, 7 o'clock Eastern and midnight Irish time. So I'm delighted to see so many familiar faces already in the comments there. Let me know what's in your glass. What are you drinking? A drop of Irish whiskey, I hope. If you can't find Irish whiskey, maybe tonight's not your night. Maybe you have to log off. Come back next week. I'm drinking a drop of this. This is my whiskey of the week, and it is Old Cumber Irish whiskey, Old Cumber. And this is a release from the Ecklandville Distillery. They brought back the Old Cumber name. They resurrected this old brand dating all the way back to 1825, which was a Northern Irish distillery. And this was a pot still whiskey they released, I think, about 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago. It is the first pot still whiskey that they released, and it is a vatting of their pot still whiskey, as well as pot still whiskey from a source distillery, Great Northern Distillery, a tiny portion from Great Northern as well. And it's my whiskey of the week because we're going to talk a lot about Ecklandville tonight because of the number of awards, the sheer number of awards that they picked up at the Irish Whiskey Awards over the past week. But this is a very, very different pot still whiskey. So we've been treated to wonderful pot still whiskies from Midleton Distillery over the past 50 years because there was nobody else making pot still whiskey until Dingle came along and started making pot still whiskey. Then Great Northern, West Cork makes some, and now we've got, so many distilleries are making pot still whiskey, but not all of them have been released yet. Old Cumber is a great representation of a different style of pot still, different flavor profile completely. So this is a really kind of a almond driven note on the nose. It's really kind of waxy, nutty, cereal driven, little hint of kind of raspberries on the nose as well, but it's a very, very different whiskey. To what we're used to. Wonderful spice. Again, that almond, like an almond flour cake. Really oily, spicy, peppery, and then dissipating to a lovely sweetness. Strawberries and cream, sprinkled again with a little almond dusting on top. Very, very different. It's my whiskey of the week. We think there'll be another one of these released. This sold out very quickly. There'll be another release of this, I think, in the next few months. So we'll pay close attention to any news on Old Cumber. And as soon as we get more on that, we'll let you know. So let me know what you're drinking. Tom is breaking into the craic. Good man, Tom. I was sipping on a bit of it myself earlier. Got a drop of the craic here. The craic is disappearing. So we're on YouTube only tonight. Facebook was having some issues with live streaming. So when I went to schedule the live stream, notification popped up saying Facebook may give you issues, may drop your stream. So I thought we'll avoid that. We'll go straight to YouTube, and it allows us to bring all the chat into one place too. So you can have the chat, you can see each other's comments all in the one place. Some of the feedback I got in the past was that if somebody's on Facebook, they don't see the comments coming in on YouTube. So we'll test this. We'll see. Maybe this is the one place that we'll go in the future too. We'll see how we go. But we won't worry about that for the moment. We have lots to cover tonight. I'm delighted to see so many of you. It's a real joy, a privilege for me anytime I get together with you all virtually and in person. Looking forward to this all weekend. Great to see so many names from the Whiskey Bus, from our Irish Whiskey Fans of America Facebook group. So many of you who've supported the Stories and Sips Whiskey Club. So many of you are Stories and Sips Whiskey Club members. So we've got lots to talk about tonight. What we're going to cover tonight is I'm going to give you an update on the whiskey releases since we last spoke last week. So there was a time when a whiskey release a month was a big deal. Now, barely 7 days since we last spoke, I'm able to give you an update of 5 or 6 more whiskies that have been released since last Sunday alone. We'll talk about those whiskies, whether we think they're interesting or not. You can share with me. I want to run through the winners of the Irish Whiskey Awards, which took place last week. We won't go into tremendous detail on every single winner, but I want to run through a few of them and talk about why they're important and why they matter. They all matter, but there's some really standout brands and distilleries that took home awards this week that we want to talk about. And I want to share with you why the Irish Whiskey Awards is the one to watch. We're also going to talk about pricing. I want to talk about pricing in whiskey. Whiskey pricing, the feedback I'm getting is that whiskey pricing is getting out of hand. It's contentious. It is much discussed. There have been a few releases in the past week that have raised eyebrows. So I want to dive into pricing. I want to talk about it. I want to explore it. I want to get your thoughts on it. So looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the whiskey world in terms of its pricing today. Pricing tends to vary in different markets. So we'll talk a little bit about pricing. We have a couple of giveaways too. I want to give away some tote bags. Should have brought them. They're downstairs. I might grab them in a second. We have tote bags to give away, which we advertised as a giveaway in our Irish Whiskey Fans of America group this week. I also want to touch very briefly on the whiskey bus. Lots of you asking me about the whiskey bus. And there was something else I wanted to talk about as well. There is something else on my list. I'm sure I'll get to it. Oh yes, our Stories and Sips Whiskey Club releases. We've got final confirmation on our JJ Corrie collaboration, the Cliffs of Moher Whiskey, which I'm excited about. So we can finally go live with that, and I'll talk about why we were delayed a week past our expected launch date. So if you've just joined us, you're very welcome. My name is Barry Chandler. I drink Irish whiskey as often as I can and talk about it even more. And this is an informal gathering. The Shebeen is a informal, often illicit pub that is that the Shebeens are dotted throughout Ireland in homes and in businesses and in sheds and out the back gardens and hidden in different places, and it's a place for us to gather, chat, have a whiskey together, and not worry about what's going on outside the four walls of our little Shebeen while we're all together. So lots of familiar faces here. I know lots of you have chats with each other, with yourselves regularly, with each other regularly. You meet up regularly. That's amazing. I'd like to see more of that happen. So feel free to say hi, introduce yourself. If you've got questions about Irish whiskey, if you don't know a certain thing about an Irish whiskey, if you want an answer about Irish whiskey, how it's made, etc., we'll do our very best to answer it. And if we can't answer it, if I don't have the answer, I won't make it up. I'll find the answer and we'll get it to you. So this should be a bit of crack, bit of an informality, while also delivering the important news from the world of Irish whiskey that we all tend to gather around each week and get overly excited about for some reason. We love whiskey. I think it's the people we love more than anything. All right, let me have a quick glance through the comments. So great to see Cheryl. How are you doing? Cheryl in Las Vegas. Talking about Gold Spot there. All right. Irishman Dick Mack's Brownberry Ale for Dave. Drinking that. Very good. Let us know what's in your glass. Dunville's 10. Actung Baby 223. Very nice. Three Swallow in Chile Long Beach, New York for John. Jeff Adams drinking some Sagamore Spirit Calvados finish. Jeff has found his way into the Irish whiskey room with an American whiskey. Good man. Oh yes, Amy. It's Amy O'Byrne is under Actung Baby, showing her U2 love there as well in her name. Basements even, yeah. There's Shebeens in basements as well. That's true. Yeah, that's right. Brian Redden has a Shebeen now in his basement. I can sense that there's some excitement in the chat tonight. I think there's some divilment, some fun will be had in the chat tonight. There'll be a bit of crack. I can see it already kicking off. This is good. Hi to Kristen. Hi to David. Hi to Greg. How are you getting on? Good to see you all. So many familiar faces. This is great. A really great community that we have growing around Irish whiskey. If you happen to be browsing on while you're listening with one ear and then scrolling through Facebook on the other, and you see anybody on our Facebook group wondering, where is this live stream that Barry was talking about? Be sure to just give them this link to our YouTube live stream and send them our way on YouTube instead. So we'll all be on YouTube for the night, and maybe we'll just do YouTube going forward. We'll see how we go. All right. We're already onto the proper 12 conversation. I can see it's going to be a long night. It's going to be a long night. So you're all very welcome to the Shebeen, and let's start off the night by talking about the whiskey releases that have popped up over the last week. And what I've done is I've reached out to whiskey brands and let them know that anything that they want us to talk about, share, discuss, that they should send our way so that we can have a chat about it and we can share it. Allows me to get more information that I can share with you as well. And again, there's so many releases happening at the moment. It's tough to keep up with them. I had a conversation, Brian Redden, we were having a chat earlier about a certain Dunville's release, and I couldn't tell where was that Dunville's release from. Didn't know, I hadn't seen it before, or couldn't tell if it was a collaboration. Such is the range of whiskies that we're now growing. It's getting very, very difficult to keep up with them. But we want our whiskey brands to send us information so that we can explore what they're releasing. Not everything comes through channels that we might monitor, Facebook or Twitter. There might be whiskey releases that go straight into retail and we don't know anything about them. We might not follow the brands online. So I'll do my best to try and digest, distill, forgive the pun, everything into the Shebeen that we can talk about the whiskey releases here each week. And again, surprising just how many whiskey releases there are now coming up each week. And it's a thing we must, I suppose, celebrate, really, isn't it? Lauren McMullen's in the chat. That's the end of us. All right, so let's start with our whiskey releases. So let's start with the first whiskey release that we want to talk about this week. So this is from Lambay Irish Whiskey. We don't tend to hear a lot about Lambay Irish Whiskey, certainly not in the United States. Has anybody ever seen Lambay Irish Whiskey in the United States? Let me know. They're more prominent and present in Europe, in Ireland, the UK, and Europe right now. But they had a much discussed release this week. Lambay Irish Whiskey released their first, I think, age statement, which is a 20-year-old single malt, aged in ex-bourbon barrels for 18 years, and then finished for 2 years in ex-Camus cognac casks. And then it was bottled at 43% ABV. 8,000 bottles for the princely sum of 560 to 600 euros for this 20-year-old single malt. Interesting, a very interesting release. It is Lambay is an island off the coast. It's in Dublin Bay, off the coast of Dublin. You can see it from the mainland. Lambay Island is home to puffins, the puffin bird. It's home to Lambay Irish Whiskey. When I say home to Irish Whiskey, there's not a distillery on the island, but there are maturation warehouses there. And so Lambay doesn't have a distillery. They source whiskey. They are owned by the Camus cognac family, who supply them with the French oak casks that they finish their whiskies in, or sometimes fully age their whiskies in. And this is no different. So this is a whiskey that is triple distilled. Interestingly, a triple distilled 20-year-old single malt can only mean one thing. It can only come from one distillery. And maybe that distillery's representative is in our chat tonight. But if it's a triple distilled 20-year-old single malt, it has to have come from a certain distillery on the Antrim coast. If it's a 20-year-old double distilled single malt, the chances are it came from a distillery on the Cooley Peninsula. There are exceptions to that rule, certainly when it comes to the North Antrim coast. But in any case, oftentimes, mostly when brands are releasing a whiskey that they've sourced, they don't tend to name the distillery that they sourced it from. But this is an interesting one. It's not cask strength, and it does come at maybe one of the highest price points we've seen a 20-year-old single malt released at, especially one that's not at cask strength. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on it, whether you've seen Lambay locally, or whether you've is this something that is priced right? Is this something you'd pursue? So a lot of work, I think, has gone into telling the story of Lambay and the casks and the French oak casks that are used for the 2-year finishing, the ex-cognac casks. But this is an interesting one to me. Steve has seen Lambay in Colorado Springs. Okay. Okay, so Kristen has the cognac cask. That's good that they're in the United States. And I think there's some really interesting expressions that they have. But this, I think, is the first one that they've had at this age statement, that they've priced this way. So that's the first release that we want to talk about. They do ship to the United States. Go to Lambay Whiskey's website. If this is something that you're interested in, go to Lambay Whiskey's website. Go to the shop. You can buy it online, and they do ship to the United States. All right, that's our first whiskey that has been released since last week. The next one is a Redbreast, Sonny Malloy's release. So Sonny Malloy's is a pub in Galway. Sonny Malloy's was the first pub in Ireland to ever get a single cask Redbreast back in 2018. And they, this week, are one of the last pubs to ever get a single cask Redbreast as Redbreast winds down its single cask program. They have a 19-year-old single pot still, single cask that was launched just this week in Galway. It is an Oloroso sherry cask matured single pot still. So all 19 years in an Oloroso sherry cask, bottled at the very high ABV of 59.6%, 486 bottles available. And again, an eye-watering 595 euros. Eye-watering. And Redbreast, I think you'll agree, has seen tremendous interest in the past 24 months. Interest that has caused it to be a bit of a victim of its own success in the sense that supply cannot possibly meet the demand that exists for the older age statements at the moment, which seems to be one of the reasons why this price is being pushed up. I do note on Sonny Malloy's own Facebook post that they mentioned something that is always a bit of a trigger for me when I see it mentioned, because then I know how they're pricing or why they're pricing accordingly. And that is the word collectability. And anytime I see the word collectability on a whiskey, I know that it's not priced to drink. It's priced for future value, which, I mean, to me, the future value of whiskey is that I had enjoyment and I have a memory created out of it, and that's its future enjoyment. But for others, it's a more long-term view of maybe buying, collecting, storing, hoarding, call it what you like, collecting, accumulating, curating collections, and then perhaps selling them for a profit later on. But this is a big price. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. But it's interesting if you compare this to, as Mark Mackenzie's mentioning there, if you compare this to the Lambay, similar pricing, this is now cask strength. You're getting a lot less water for your money than you are on the first release. Now, obviously, a very different style. It's a year younger. But when we talk about pricing later, I want to talk about the non-linear evaluation on whiskey pricing in terms of age that I think is important. In other words, I don't believe that whiskey should go up in price according to just its age alone, or that we should evaluate or measure it that way. I'll explain what I mean by that when we get to the pricing stage. But that's a release that I don't know, will it sell out? I bought the first release. I have it on the shelf here behind me. I have two of them. I think I finished one. I bought a second one, and it was half the price of this, or maybe 310, 320. The first release was a 16-year-old whiskey. Fantastic whiskey. Sonny Malloy's and the Palace Bar Redbreasts were two extraordinary whiskies back in the good old days of 300 odd euro pricing, which seemed to be gone. Those days seem to be long gone. But in any case, look, this program is winding down, the single cask program, which means once these Redbreast single casks go, they're gone. And until Redbreast bring back that program, or until such time as they have stock that has been aged sufficiently, well, we have to wait years for that. So that is another one worth paying attention to. What I will do when I go to Sonny Malloy's or go to Galway is buy a pour of it, which I don't know what they're selling it at. No doubt north of 50 euros a measure, but maybe worth trying. Maybe worth trying. Brian really wants the Sonny's, but that's a tough price point. It is a tough price point. Jason's doing that. He's going to get a glass of it there, but passing on a bottle. Dunville's Port Morant, yeah, that is priced the same, says Greg. I agree. It's interesting how pricing is going now. This isn't representative of all pricing, but it is showing us perhaps the demand, perhaps the interest. Sonny Malloy's know maybe that they can move it, or maybe it's not something that has to move immediately. Maybe it's something that's just a hero product for them, that if it sells in 2 years or 3 years, they're happy enough and they haven't lost out. So in any case, it is interesting that it was released, but the chatter online seems to have been eyebrow raising. Can you raise your eyes? I don't know. You can raise your eyebrows. Okay. Next up is a far lower price point for a similar age whiskey. So this caught my eye this week. Very, very interesting. Teeling have a new series out, a series of 21-year-old single malts called the Rising Reserve series. And it may be the most beautiful packaging I've ever seen Teeling utilize. Brand Hatch Creative are the team behind it, and a remarkably stunning package. Dark bottle, dark box. That's that signature shape we're used to from Teeling, but boy, it's a beautiful package. Let me zoom in a bit here so you get to see it a bit better. But that's a really, really lovely presentation. So 21-year-old single malt, 16 years in bourbon barrels, and then 5 years in white port, ex-white port casks, and 46% ABV, €225. That is right now available. I found it online on the Celtic Whiskey Shop. It wasn't available on Teeling's own website, but Celtic Whiskey Shop in Dublin has it, €225, which again, these are big numbers. I'm not for a minute going to pretend that I hate that whiskey costs me this, like I'm not going to pretend that for a minute. However, we will discuss pricing and we will talk about that in a second. In any case, this is an interesting one. This is one I might put on my list, maybe my Christmas list. We know that Teeling have hundreds of expressions. They have so many series that it's tough to keep up with. They themselves state that they have hundreds of different cask types and casks that have contained very different liquids before they were used for whiskey. And their work, in addition to distilling their own whiskies in Dublin, is, I suppose, playing magician, alchemist with the whiskies that they inherited, that they sourced previously, that they're now recasking, that they're finishing in these different casks. So white port, ex-white port cask, it's really interesting. 5 years. If this was available by the measure, I'd buy it in the morning just to try a pour of it. I don't know how many bars will have this by the measure, but I think that's an interesting one. Jeff says this Teeling will still be sourced from Cooley, he believes. I don't know. It's a good question. I suspect so. I suspect so. David wants to know if there's how long Celtic Whiskey Shop will hold on to a purchase going over in March. I don't know that they do hold on to purchases, do they? Because when you buy online, they're not shipping them. They're not in the shop. They're in an actually different location on the other side of Dublin. They have a warehouse in a different part of Dublin that their stock is available from. But you could certainly have many Irish friends hold on to it for you, I'm sure, if you want to ship it to them. Dave Cummins says he'd be more likely to spend money on whiskey in a more interesting cask type than what we see time and time again. Yeah, I'm with you as well. I think there's a lot of fantastic experimentation happening in Teeling, and Alex Chasko is a great man for the experimentation with wood types and wood casks. Those of you who joined us on the whiskey bus were treated to 9 different cask strength samples before 11 o'clock in the morning at Teeling on our first day, when we sampled some astonishingly different and wildly varying cask types. And it was astonishing to see how pretty much the same liquid in all of those different cask types behaved so differently. So yeah, I'm a fan of what they're doing with the different cask types. Absolutely. All right, so that's a release from Teeling. All right, so here's one. Here's an interesting one for you all. The Wolfe Tones, famous Irish rebel band. Everyone knows the Wolfe Tones. Every Irish pub around the world plays their songs, their rebel songs. We can break into a rendition of Come Out Ye Black and Tans or any other song you want. But the Wolfe Tones have released their own Irish whiskey without much public fanfare, because they don't need public fanfare. They have their own group, their own audience, their own followers, their own community who buy this up very, very quickly. This is available on the Wolfe Tones website, and it is a Great Northern Distillery distilled product. It is a blended 5-year-old whiskey, bourbon barrel matured, and a sherry cask finish, 40% ABV, and €69.95. And they have shipping options on their website. Now, their website looks like it was built in 1982, and it'll take a little bit of time to navigate around it. You would imagine by clicking on the button that says shop that you'll find the whiskey, but you can be fooled by making such a logical decision. Instead, you have to scroll down to one of the news sections, find a link to the news, and then they'll give you a link to another page that's not on any navigation where you'll find their whiskey if it's something you want. But I don't think this will last very long, because their followers, the Wolfe Tone community, is a big community, and I think this will sell out quickly. They only launched 2 days ago, and they just mentioned today that they only have a few of these left. a few of these left. So that's the Wolf Tones Rebel Irish Whiskey. And incidentally, they dedicated this release to the late Brian Watts, the head distiller at Great Northern Distillery, who sadly passed away a few weeks ago. And they released this and mentioned in the release that this was being released in his name, and to thank him for all he did to help them release their whiskey. They also mentioned that it's their first release and there may be more releases. So something to keep an eye out for. And also a look at that price point, €69.95. We may not often reach that price point on whiskies that come up here again, but we'll try. I mean, if a whiskey gets released at $18, we'll talk about it. You can find Paddy Irish whiskey on the shelf in the United States at $18 in some places at the moment, which is, I mean, incredible value. Absolutely incredible value. Jason, still not happy, and he'd like to see it stronger than 40% for €70. Yeah, well, look, I think it's priced to move, and I think it'll be a good money maker, an absolute money maker for them, depending on how much they have of it. That's the Wolf Tones Rebel Irish Whiskey. You can find details of that on their own website. Go to the Wolf Tones website to find out more information on that. Next up, Hinch Distillery, a stop on our Whiskey Bus tour, had a release this week. Another whiskey in the age range of 19 to 21. This one's a little bit different, and let's talk about it. It's a 19-year-old single malt, bourbon barrel matured, but finished in a wine cask, a Chateau de la Ligne finish. Chateau de la Ligne is the winery and chateau that is owned by the man who owns Hinch Distillery, who built Terry Cross, who built Hinch Distillery in County Down, and he is the owner of a winery and he's the owner of a distillery. There aren't many owners who have both a distillery and a winery. And what's interesting to me about this release is that not only has the whiskey been finished in the wine casks that come from Terry's winery, but for that price point, which I think is 295 British pounds on their website, I've translated there to €310, or that's about $305 or $300 at the current exchange rate. You get both the 19-year-old single malt and you get a bottle of 2018 Chateau de la Ligne wine to go with it. So they're both presented in this packaging, this case, which let me zoom in on that for you. A little bit larger there. This looks really interesting, and I like the source whiskies. I like the older source whiskies that Hinch have released so far, and they're doing interesting things with their new make spirit. And they're whiskies that they're maturing currently. What's interesting about this packaging, it's unusual because when you open up the package, inside are two slots for the bottles. So you'll put your Hinch whiskey to the left and you'll put your wine bottle to the right. But here's the thing, unless you're going to drink these, this case may not make sense, because how do we store wine? Lying down. And how do we store whiskey? Standing up. So do we stand the box up or do we lie it down? That's the quandary. But I suspect if you're going to open these bottles, this is a moot point and something that we can gloss over very quickly. But Jamie Cotter, congratulations, Jamie from Hinch, on the release of this. It's an interesting release. Looking forward to trying a drop of that. Tom just finished a Hinch 10-year-old sherry cask, €38 or $38 on sale. Great stuff. That is a great price point. Oh, this is the 19. Did we tried this, didn't we, on the Whiskey Bus? This is the 19-year-old that we tried. I'm pretty sure this is the one we tried when we were at Hinch. Rick's mentioning there he happened to sign this Hinch bottle, sitting here with Rick. Yeah, I believe we tried this. Imagine being able to remember all 69 pours of whiskey that we tried on the Whiskey Bus. Jeff says, send up the box, screw the wine. And Andrew says, after you drank them, you'll be lying down, so it should balance out. 45-degree angle, meet in the middle. Good man, Dave. Dave's a problem solver. Dave's got about 6 whiskies that he remembers well from our 69 official whiskies that we tried on the Whiskey Bus tour. So congratulations to Hinch Distillery on that release. And I now remember it, now that you've all reminded me. Okay, next up is Dunville's. We're going to hear a lot about Dunville's today. Dunville's released this week a 12-year-old single malt, bourbon barrel matured with a PX Pedro Jimenez sherry cask finish, released at cask strength. Why didn't I put the ABV in there? I should have put the ABV in there, but it's at cask strength. This went on sale for £125, which is about €142 or about $135. And it's still available on the website. I checked just before I went live. Anyone who has tried one of the single cask series from Dunville's knows the quality. These are coolly sourced distillates. They are well made, well distilled. The barrel management and their maturing program has been fantastic at Dunville's, and it shines through in all of the whiskey that they've released. They're getting an absolute cult following, and long may it remain a cult following, because once they go mainstream with the attention, these whiskies, I suspect, will shoot up in both rarity and price, because there won't be enough of them to go around. I picked up a bottle of this week. I didn't pick up a bottle of any of the others that we mentioned so far. This is the one that I did buy, and I'm looking forward to trying this. I know quite a few of you actually picked this up as well. 12-year-old single malt, bourbon barrel mature. Now, some of you might be looking at that price going, what? 12-year-old whiskey, $140 approximately plus shipping. We'll talk about pricing in a minute. We'll talk about pricing. Something that influences that is going to be A, it's a sherry cask. B, not a sherry cask, a single cask, pardon me. A, it's a single cask. B, it's a cask strength. So those two things are going to play into our evaluation of whether we think something is value or not. Also, there has been such a demand historically for the Dunville single casks that the website has crashed historically. The Dunville's team have done everything they can to mitigate such disasters because they know the demand is out there. And I think, look, they're priced for the demand as well. And this week, they put a really clever system in place on their website where as soon as you went to buy the whiskey, you were put into a queue that was linked to the shopping cart system. So everyone, it basically said you're number 36 in line. Your wait is approximately 4 minutes. And as people checked out, you could see yourself moving down 35, 34, 33. And I was able to check out in about 5 minutes. Really clever system that prevented the checkout from crashing or the website from crashing. So kind of staged the release of the whiskey or the purchase of the whiskey. In any case, this is one I'm really interested in. I have a soft spot for Dunville's. I really like Jarlath Watson and the team, Stephen McGuinness and the team, and Graham, the distiller in Dunville's in Ecklandville. Dunville's, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a resurrected brand. It's a brand that dates all the way back to 1808. A Belfast brand, very famous, very well known, back in the height of the Irish whiskey, the last Irish whiskey renaissance, which we really would have been the 1800s, the mid to late 1800s. Dunville's was a huge whiskey brand, part of the Royal Distilleries Company based in Belfast. And famously, the Royal Distilleries Company shut down. They put themselves out of business on purpose when heirs to the distillery, heirs to the brand, in various circumstances died, killed in an accident, were overseas, didn't have any interest in running the business, and the board of directors shuttered the company when they were trading well, and the Dunville's brand was extinguished. It's a really historic brand. Dunville's would be to Belfast like Powers is to Dublin in terms of their community involvement. There's still lots of areas in Belfast named for Dunville's Park. There's a distillery football team that is the Dunville's, Old Dunville's team. So it's a resurrected brand, just like Old Cumber is a resurrected brand, both by Ecklandville. So Ecklandville doing a good job of recreating old brands, resurrecting old brands and bringing them out to us in a new format. And building on the history, I suppose. I think there's great stories that could get lost. No different than John Teeling bringing back the likes of the Tyrconnell, the likes of Kilbeggan whiskies. And I'm a big fan of when a whiskey brand is resurrected the right way for the right reasons and homage is paid to its history. I think when that's done right, big fan. All right, let me have a sip of my Old Cumber that I'm talking about. Dave says that boys in Ecklandville can seriously pick a savage sherry cask. They sure can. Amazing cask management at Ecklandville. We were lucky enough on our whiskey bus to stand in the warehouse for 2 hours and just drink from casks, which is a ridiculous thing to say, isn't it? We stood in the warehouse and drank from the casks, and we listened to Graham and we listened to Jarlath and Stephen share with us the story, the journey of some of these casks, and they've done a tremendous job of warehousing correctly, casking, recasking, finishing in a fantastic way. Really, really good. You can find Dunville's whiskies in the United States. I think they're distributors. They're sold, I think, uniquely or exclusively through Total Wine, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody will tell me if I'm wrong on that. But I think it's Total Wine. Martin says that everyone on the chat tonight should get first crack at the new club release. All right, Martin, we'll talk about that. Rick says high fives for Dunville's label art. Yes, I agree. So the old 12, so this one that you're seeing here on the screen, that's how it used to look. So that is the old label that has been updated a little bit. So interestingly, if you go to the Friend at Hand whiskey shop in Belfast, you walk to the back of the store and you'll see the old Dunville's bottles, and that's exactly how they looked. They had that VR. Now, interestingly, that VR those initials would have been Victoria Royal, I think, isn't it? Victoria Royal historically, and today it's kind of very rare. Maybe a slight change of direction on the old signature there, or the old, those letters. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's as far as I remember, that's what that used to stand for, Victoria Royal. Rick says he can still smell that warehouse. So there's a number of different Total Wine, says Greg. Yes, Total Wine. There's a number of different labels, which we'll talk about in a second. Actually, let me show you this one. So that label that you just saw is the label for some of their single casks, but also their 10-year-old single malt that you see in Total Wine, the PX one. There's another label that's if you've got the Port Morant, the single cask Port Morant, which is the red label. And then there's this label, which is the green label. So there's 3 different styles of label. This green label means it is a single cask for one single location, which means it can't be sold anywhere else. So this one is the Palace Bar. I'm going to crack that open later. This is the Dunville's Palace Bar collaboration. This is a 20-year-old. I'll crack that open on the stream today. And if it's a red label, it can be a single cask that is for more general release. So there'd be some of those bottles available in different locations, like the Port Morant was. Okay, so let us move on from the Dunville's 12-year-old. Do we have other ones? Okay, that's it. Those are the releases this week. So let's go back and recap them. What do we have? We had Lambay Irish Whiskey, 20-year-old single malt. Redbreast Sonny Malloy's release, 19-year-old single pot still. We had the Teeling Rising Reserve, 21-year-old single malt. Wolftone's Rebel Irish Whiskey, and 19-year-old single malt as well from Hinch. And Dunville's 12-year-old single malt. Okay. Steve, I was talking about the single casks. So the single casks, right? Or is the single cask series, the Three Crowns is a different one. Yeah, the Three Crowns is a different one. It's a cream label. And the 1808 then is a different thing altogether. That's a blended whiskey. But their malt single casks follow 3 labels. The original label, the red label, and then the green label. Those would be the 3 that are the single casks, to the best of my knowledge. And yeah, there are sherry and peated Dunvilles in the United States. Yeah, I had a Dunville's peated recently, the Three Crowns peated. It is something that gets overlooked in the growth of the peated Irish whiskey market. So we'll talk more about that peat in a second. So let's talk about the Irish Whiskey Awards, because the Irish Whiskey Awards took place this week, and they are the highlight of the awards calendar for Irish whiskies in Ireland. There are no shortage of awards shows and awards places where you can get a medal. Sometimes there's whiskey brands look like North Korean generals, the number of medals they be hanging around the neck of the bottle. Most whiskey awards shows mean very little. Let's be honest about it. Most whiskey awards shows are pay per play. You pay to enter. You or in some whiskey award shows, you almost always win. So you'd either get bronze, silver, or gold for entering. And those award shows, we don't have any transparency or visibility necessarily into the judging process, into the evaluation process. But for whiskey brands starting out, it's an easy way to grab a little bit of attention and say, oh, we just got gold at this awards show. Meanwhile, the winner was a platinum. But in any case, I only say that to hero the Irish Whiskey Awards because you can't pay to enter the Irish Whiskey Awards. You can only submit your bottles. And you submit for 3 to 5 bottles of a whiskey that you want to release or that you want to evaluate. And only whiskies released in the year leading up to that awards show can be included. And there's a number of different categories that we'll talk about, but it's very transparent and it's very democratic, and it's something that we can trust because what happens to whiskies once you submit them to the awards show is that to the Irish Whiskey Awards is that all the bottles are then decanted into sample bottles. They're divided up into samples, which are blind samples. And those blind samples, in other words, unlabeled, nobody has any clue what they are sent out in batches to whiskey clubs and whiskey societies around the island of Ireland. And over a 2 or 3 week period, whiskey clubs and whiskey societies will summon their members, invite their members to come to a location, a venue, and spend the afternoon sampling blind all of the whiskies. Now, what is the benefit of sampling all the whiskies blind, and what's the benefit of having whiskey club members doing it? Well, the first thing is whiskey club and whiskey society members tend to be people who have an interest in whiskey, so they may have more of an ability to evaluate an Irish whiskey because they're part of an Irish whiskey club, perhaps. In any case, there'd certainly be whiskey clubs. The whiskey clubs that I'm part of in Ireland, I learn from the people that are there every time I visit. Cork Whiskey Society, a great example, some great knowledge in the Cork Whiskey Society. And I'm always learning things when I visit or attend Irish Whiskey Society in Dublin, exactly the same. Nothing but legends of teachers and committee members there that I learn something from every time. So they're distributed out to the whiskey clubs, and then these samples are sampled, they're tasted, they're nosed, and they're scored. And the scores are tabulated, they're sent back to the Celtic Whiskey Shop. The Celtic Whiskey Shop runs this. They run it with adjudication from the Irish Whiskey Association, led by William Lavelle. And I know Irish Whiskey Magazine in the past has been involved in the adjudicating as well, to ensure that everything is kosher. And the scores are then tallied. And the beauty of this system is that the tasters are not in any way led by bias. They're not led by emotion. They're not led by price. They're not led by age. They have no idea any of those things when they go to taste a whiskey. All they'll know is the color of it, the nose of it, the taste of it. That's it. And they'll score it accordingly on a set of scores. And that means that once the results come in, we know that the awards were ranked and awarded to the whiskies that tasted the best. It's as simple as that. There's no other way to do it. They were tasted. The whiskies that tasted the best were the ones that won. Now, the only caveat I'll add in here is that the Irish Whiskey Awards is made up of whiskies that were submitted. So if you didn't submit a whiskey, it wasn't part of the Irish Whiskey Awards. And we don't know who was or wasn't included. So we don't know if all the single malts were included. We don't know if one brand decided, I'm going to abstain, I'm not going to enter unless they declare publicly, I'm not submitting anything. So that's the other thing, is we don't know how many brands enter, but it is a very popular award show, and it is one that sells out. The tickets for the event, it took me 5 attempts to get a ticket to get into the Irish Whiskey Awards, because they're all allocated to the people who, to the whiskey companies who make whiskey. And me, as a non-whiskey maker, thought I was going to be peering in the window at the Irish Whiskey Awards. But luckily enough, I got a ticket thanks to Celtic Whiskey Shop in the end, thanks to Katie there for finding me a ticket. It was held at the Pierce Lyons Distillery, Ireland's most beautiful distillery. There is no two ways about it. An old church, St. James's Church, on James's Street in Dublin, opposite the Guinness Brewery, beside Rowan Co. You know exactly where it is if you've been to Dublin. Beautiful restored church, restored by Dr. Pierce Lyons and his wife prior to his passing. And that's Conor Ryan led the charge and set up a great events show there. So that's where the event took place this year. It was fantastic, about 125 people in there. We had 19 samples that we tasted when we got on the night. So there was 19 samples of everything from gin, liqueurs, vodkas, but then primarily whiskeys. I think about 15 different whiskeys were included as well. So I want to touch on some of the whiskeys because they're worth mentioning, those that won awards. And and we'll go from there. Any questions, let me know. All right, so here's the first. Oh, let me load this up a little bit bigger so you can see it. So I think this one is worth paying close attention. So the winner of Irish Single Pot Still Whiskey of the Year, 11 years and younger, were our friends at Two Stacks, who won with their Polaris 2.1, isn't it? Or their second Polaris 2.1. So this is a remarkable achievement for a young whiskey brand, obviously a sourced whiskey. Two Stacks doesn't make whiskey. They source whiskey, just like they sourced our whiskey, our first club whiskey, the Craic, and they sourced this pot still whiskey from Great Northern Distillery. It's quite a unique whiskey because it is a mash bill that is not typical, and it's not the mash bill, the pot still mash bill that Great Northern makes. In fact, they're not going to make it again that we know of. It's a 70-30 unmalted barley, malted barley mash bill, and then it is aged in bourbon barrels and finished in ice wine casks. And this is an interesting win and an exciting win because it kind of breaks the monopoly that the one distillery that made pot still whiskey for 50 years in Ireland had, which is the Midleton Distillery. And I don't want to take away from Midleton for a second because I'm a big Midleton fan, and every whiskey brand that comes along stands on their shoulders, we have to acknowledge. But congrats to the lads at Two Stacks, to Liam, to Shane, to Donal, because it's a remarkable, remarkable achievement. And they were so thrilled on the night to win. And I think this sold out very, very quickly. Once it was, the words came out that they won, they put a few bottles they had left out there, and it sold out almost instantly. So congrats to the lads at Two Stacks for winning best single pot still whiskey under 11 years of age. Next up, the single pot still whiskey over 12 years of age, so 12 years and older. The winner was Redbreast 15. Now, when I sampled the Redbreast 15 on the mat, the tasting mat, so you have a blind tasting mat as well, it just says, it gives you the category name. It doesn't tell you what the whiskey is until they announce the winner. I didn't recognize Redbreast 15. In fact, I didn't even enjoy it. I sampled and thought, I don't like this at all. Yet I've had Redbreast 15 in the past and I've loved it. And the same reaction from two others at the table. Paul and Laurie were saying, that didn't go down well at all. Whether there was something to do with the batch that was on our mat or whether we were just thrown completely. But in any case, kudos to Redbreast. You couldn't have a pot still category that doesn't have a Redbreast somewhere. Let's be honest. 15 is the most controversial, I think, amongst Redbreast fans, only because it is so high in the percentage of whiskey that's aged in bourbon barrels as opposed to fortified wine casks, the sherry casks. Look, Redbreast is a sherry cask brand. It's built on sherry casks. It has thrived on sherry casks. But the 15 strikes a different balance. It's more distillate forward. It's more bourbon barrel forward, and that lends a different flavor profile to Redbreast 15. It's kind of like the Marmite. You either love it or you don't. Kind of typically it's down on my list. I'm not massively into it. But interestingly, anyway, they have won. They won the 2022 Single Pot Still 12 years and older. So kudos. Well, comments are coming in fast. Greg wants to know, have I had the Teeling Pineapple Rum? I have had, yeah. You'll hear mention about it in a second. The winner of Single Malt Whiskey 11 years and younger is Dunville's 10-year-old Single Malt PX cask. So this is the one that you find in Total Wine. You can get this in the United States. So this was the first award of the night for Jarlath and Graham and the team, Stephen and the team at Ecklandville. And they were thrilled with that. They weren't expecting that. So Single Malt, 11 years and younger, that's a 10-year-old Single Malt. So kudos to the team at Ecklandville for that. And great to know that that's available to you. It's on your shelves wherever there's a Total Wine. So hopefully you can get hold of that. That was the first time that we saw Ecklandville up on the stage. It wasn't the last time. Here's the interesting one. We don't hear much about Jack Ryan. Jack Ryan won Irish Single Malt Whiskey 12 to 15 years of age. So this is a 12-year-old single malt. It's called the Finisher's Touch. and it is aged in bourbon barrels, but also Madeira casks, if my memory serves me right. Finished in Madeira casks, yeah. So Jack Ryan, again, a sourced whiskey, 12 years old. Jack Ryan is a brand I know almost nothing about. Almost nothing about it. I'd like to learn more about them. So if there's anybody from Jack Ryan on the stream, or you know anybody, would you ever tell them to get in touch and send some information? And I'd love to find out more about it, because I've had conversations with a few people over the past few weeks who brought up Jack Ryan unprompted and shared that they really enjoyed this brand. So Jack Ryan, I've noticed actually there are little kits of different Jack Ryans, like miniatures, 50 ml miniature kits of Jack Ryan that are on the market too. I'm going to try and pick one of those up if I see them as well. So that one for single malt, 12 to 15 years of age. And then it was time for Graham and Jarlath and Stephen to go back up on the stage for Ecklinville, because their Dunville's Irish Single Malt Whiskey of the Year won their 20-year-old single malt, which was their Oloroso and Sherry cask finish. This is the red label I was talking about. 20-year-old won for single malt whiskey, 16 years and older of the year. Their 20-year-old single malt. So congrats to Ecklinville. Again, another Dunville's win. Dunville's must have submitted a good lot of whiskies for evaluation, as they should. And the crowd responded in kind. So some of you have had Jack Ryan, some of you have not. Some of you have tried it and don't like it. Others have tried it and like it. The good thing about whiskey, I suppose. Dave wants to know what cask number this was. It's the cask. I can't tell from here. It's all online. All the awards info is in our Facebook group. And if the cask number isn't on that, we'll get you the cask number. Cheryl says this is the one she's drinking right now. Cheryl, you are drinking an award winner. 20 years of age. Actually, I bet you I can find the cask right now. Cheryl might type it in, but I have it here. Very easy. We go to the Irish Whiskey Awards Twitter. And it is... No, that's their Palo Cortado. Cask number... Oh, doesn't have it on their Twitter either. All right. We'll come back to it. Okay. Next up, here's an interesting one. So this is a surprising win. It's the best blended Irish whiskey of the year. The best blended Irish whiskey of the year. So now, blended whiskey is the most sold style of Irish whiskey in the world, isn't it? Jameson, Powers Gold, Proper Number 12, Tullamore Dew, Bushmills Original. These are all blended Irish whiskies. This is a peated blend. Peated. Oh, shock. It was the only peated whiskey of the night. So before the awards show kicked off, I had my nose buried in all the sample glasses, nosing, sniffing, seeing if I could pick out what whiskies were what. And then this one came up this peated whiskey came to my nose. I thought, wow, a peated whiskey has won best blended Irish whiskey. My first thoughts were, it's one of the Silkies. It's the legendary Dark Silky, perhaps. It wasn't. It was from Mickle Irish Whiskey. So Mickle sources their whiskey. They are a distillery. Many of you know we had Padraig, one of the founders of Mickle, Padraig O'Greelish, on the lock-in 2 years ago at this stage. And they've launched a distillery in Galway, in Salt Hill in Galway, just a mile out the road from Galway city. You walk along the promenade, out the Claddagh, out the promenade, and then you'll get to the roundabout, and then on the right you'll see a bar called Oslo, and then behind it is Mickle Distillery. And this is their Inverin release, and it is a small batch blended whiskey that is peated. Now, it raised some interesting questions. First of all, is it right to have a peated whiskey go against a non-peated whiskey in a category? And we had this discussion, Fionn O'Connor and myself and Cahur. We had this discussion, and they all reckoned that there should be a separate category for peated whiskies. And I would tend to agree, because you either like peated or you don't, or you grow to love it. Am I right? But the peated whiskey category would, if you smelled a peated whiskey and you didn't like peated, and you tasted the whiskey and you didn't like peated, you're immediately not going to rate this very highly because of your own personal kind of dislike. So it almost should have its own category. But anyway, congratulations to Mickle on the win. It's a great win for them. And kudos to them. They're making some really interesting poutines and creams and pot stills up there in Galway as well, worth checking out. Next up is the best blended whiskey of the year with an age statement. Now, there's not too many age statement blended whiskies out there. Is there? Are there? Is there? Are there? Which is correct. The Jameson 18, interestingly, won it. Not the Bow Street, but Jameson 18-year-old. And they won best blended whiskey with an age statement of the year. And I'm trying to think, what are the other age statement blends that we might be familiar with? I'm blanking on that one, but I'm sure you'll think of some others that are age statement blends. So Jameson picked that up, and that's a dark horse. The Jameson 18-year-old is a great whiskey, and Jameson 18 Bow Street, maybe even a better whiskey. But those two together, great whiskies. Pricing is getting a little bit high, but still fantastic, fantastic whiskies. Next up, here's the Teeling Pineapple. So this one, Teeling's whiskey that was aged in or finished in a pineapple rum cask, Stiggin's Fancy Pineapple Rum, won for best limited release blended whiskey. So this is a limited release, so only short run, was not widely available, and so Teeling won that on the night. So congrats to Teeling on that one. This is the one, Cheryl, am I right, that you wanted to get a cask of your own of it? Or was there a different one? Maybe it was this one. Cheryl had her checkbook out. She's ready to go. Teeling then, another winner here. I cut out the little awards emblem there because they had the wrong awards emblem on it. This is the pot still, the limited pot still, isn't it? Let me see which award this was. This is the winner of the best Irish single cask whiskey, 11 years and younger. Winner of the best Irish single cask whiskey, 11 years and younger. And it's the Teeling Celtic Whiskey Shop collaboration, finished in chestnut casks. And Chestnut PX, isn't it? Chestnut and PX? So many of them I went through. Chestnut PX cask. And it was fantastic. It was a great whiskey. Maybe one of the surprises for me on the night that this was the, I wasn't expecting this one. And I might look out for this, actually. I forgot all about it since I put this together. But that was the winner on the night for best single cask whiskey under 11 years and under. So I might actually go get that. Drank so well. And this is Teeling's own liquid. Teeling's pot still is made in Dublin. And it might be the first of the Teeling pot stills that I really, really enjoy. The others have not been completely to my liking. And this one might be the first where I say, you know what? The cask finish here really helped it. Some people might say when you don't like a distillate forward whiskey, but you love it when it is finished in a certain cask, that you're really only getting a flavored whiskey. This is an argument I see mentioned online that, well, what are you really getting here? Are you drinking the cask? Are you drinking the whiskey? I don't think it really matters. I think as long as you enjoy it, it is what it is. So this one is a single pot still made in Dublin, finished in Chestnut PX cask. There's an interesting one. Chestnut PX cask. Next up is Dunville's again. So this is the Irish single cask whiskey of the year, 12 years and older. Now, this one is not yet on the market. It is about to be released. It's about to be released. It's a 21-year-old single malt, aged in finished in Palo Cortado sherry casks. And it is a stunner, an absolute stunner. This is a 21-year-old single malt again, Cooley distillate, and this is finished in sherry casks that are the Palo Cortado sherry casks. The cask number, I don't have it to hand on that, but it is this was the single cask whiskey of the night. So now poor Jarlath, Watson, and Graham and Stephen needed a trolley or a truck to take all their whiskey boxes away with them. In fact, I think I have a picture here to show you. It is. Oh, look at this! I already have a message with the contact details from for the founders of Jack Ryan Whiskey. How about that? Look how fast word travels. Who's watching? I know you guys are watching. All right, thanks for that. Here's an interesting photo I took of Graham, the distiller, with all his awards. Let me go up full screen there so you can see it. These are all the boxes that Graham has. There's all the awards that Ecklandville was winning. Put this up on the screen. Okay, so this was the single cask of the year, 12 years and older, 21-year-old. Expect to see that coming soon. The best Irish cask strength whiskey. There's no beating this, is there? Redbreast 27. Best Irish cask strength whiskey. Redbreast 27. Just any cask strength of any age. This category allowed entrants to be any age. Redbreast 27. Hard to beat it. I mean, come on. It's hard to beat it. Is there, if you could just ignore the price. But now, look, this is a 27-year-old whiskey that has 32-year-old components in it that is priced at approximately the same price now as we're seeing 19 and 20-year-old malts and pot stills. So Redbreast 27 suddenly looking like value. Did we ever think we'd be saying that? But it's an astonishingly good whiskey. I think you all know. I would keep that in my top 5 of all time. Be tough to move it out of it for me. I have a pour or two left in my bottle here, and I keep turning away from the bottle saying, no, I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to touch it. Save it. All right. So that was the cask strength whiskey of the year. And then here's an interesting one. So this is the winner of the best new Irish whiskey. There's an interesting package. I think this is a maybe an artist's impression because I haven't seen this whiskey. It is a 5-year-old single malt from Pierce Lyons themselves. And it has a four cask vatting of casks in it, and I don't have them all to hand. This was a one that by the time we got to this point of the night, my brain was fried and I couldn't even remember my own name or where I was going or coming from. But it was a winner on the night, and I do remember tasting it and being surprised at how good it was, only because I'd never come across it before. I think it's about to be released. I don't think it's released yet, but I'll get more information on it. This is the best new Irish whiskey of the year. It's a 5-year-old whiskey from Pierce Lyons, and it's their own whiskey that they distilled themselves. So I'll get more information on that, and I'll share that with you. And then it all came down to this. So the winners of each category were then all measured point-wise against one another, so that the one with the highest score, the category with the highest score, would become the winner on the night. And it was Dunville's yet again. It was Ecklandville Distillery with their Palo Cortado sherry cask finish, Irish Whiskey of the Year 2022. A remarkable achievement for Dunville's, for Ecklandville. Not remarkable because we don't expect it of them, but because they cleaned up with so many awards on the night. I think 6 awards, maybe 7 awards on the night. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can count 6 awards in Graham's stack there anyway, which is fantastic. So that was the Irish Whiskey winner of the Irish Whiskey of the Year, which is a fantastic thing. So congrats to Dunville's, congrats to Jarlath, congrats to the team in Ecklandville. And again, this one is due to be released. It may be January by the time this comes out, but it's one to look out for. And I think they now get to add a few extra dollars to their price point, right? Irish Whiskey of the Year. I was joking with them afterwards that I wish we'd seen the prices before they won the award, you know. All right, so those are the Irish Whiskey awards. Let's talk about, let me look at your comments, your questions. If you've got any questions, let me know. Lots of you out there picking up some of those Redbreast 27s. David wants to know, can we get a reserve number of bottles like last week's release from Dunville's? It's an interesting question, and it's not something I considered. And then I saw it happening in our group, in our club, which is great. And you all went and organized it yourselves, which saved me an awful lot of work. So fair play to you. So the release this week, in case it all sold out, there was some shady back alley dealings done behind the scenes between some of you and the distillery directly, asking, hey, sure, we came on the whiskey bus. Surely you'll carve aside a portion of the release for us with your hat in your hands, like Oliver Twist. And you did get an allocation. I will look into that. I think it's a great idea. If we can figure that out in a scalable way, I'll do it 100%. If we know something's coming, And so what we could do maybe in return is we could offer a tasting event where we all taste it together online, or where we we have them come on and taste the whiskey with us. 100%. I think it's a great idea. And especially if we can guarantee a number, like X number, if we can manage to move 20 bottles in a kind of a pre-release order, then they'll come on and do a tasting with us. I like the idea, David. You're onto something. And Brian Sharp, who organized it as well, fair play. Brian says Seamus offered it to him and the bus ruffians. He didn't come to me, the chancer. Well, I know you all dropped some coin up in Ecklandville. You all dropped some money. You all dropped some Benjamins. 20, better make it 50. Yeah, look, I think that'd be a very attractive thing if we could go to a brand and say, keep 50 of these aside for us and we'll buy them all up. We guarantee them. I'm sure we could get that done. That's a no-brainer. Every brand would be willing to do that with us. Well, now, because of all your Brian Sharp, because of all your shady back alley dealings, you've now become the official deal with the brands and figure this out for us. Appointee. You'll have to do less of your day job and more of your back alley whiskey and horse trading dealings. So we moved 18 of the 12-year-old for the bus people, not counting the ones I bought. Okay. That's good to know. That's great. I think that's some value in our there's value in our numbers, isn't there? Purchasing scale. Okay. Well, keep your powder dry, because there may be something interesting from Dunville's that I'll talk about in a minute that you'll all want to be part of as well. So let's keep going. Ruffians. So is the Ruffians a new kind of a subgroup within the club? So the Ruffians are the ones who don't want to abide by the regular rules of purchase, and they want their own set, like put aside, like, no, well, you want us to go to the website? Oh, it's crazy. Don't you know I'm a ruffian? Maybe this could be a little subculture, a little counterculture within the club. I kind of like it. I gave somebody a taste of Dunville's who is a massive Redbreast fan and a huge purchaser of Redbreast recently, and they had never had a Dunville's in their life because they never really found themselves as a single malt person. They tried the Dunville's Friend at Hand release and they may never buy a Redbreast again. The cask management is just spectacular. So are you ruffians or hooligans? Hooligans would be a bit more kind of, you're going to destroy the place. Like, hooligans sounds like you're going to burn the distillery down. All right, so you're all handing off negotiating ability to Brian. You can just like lodge credit cards with Brian, and Brian will do the purchasing on your behalf. All right, I'm going to make a note of ruffians here because, look, crazy things have come out of live streams. Some of you might remember a little thing called the Whiskey Bus. All right, ruffians. We get busier and busier every time we have a live stream. One more thing to do. Okay, I'm going to switch up my whiskey. All this talk of Dunville's. Little wash of the palate. And we're going to open one. We're going to open it. Should be Notions Barry. What, the whiskey notions? Lauren, no, we can't call them notions. All right, here's the whiskey I'm opening next. This is Dunville's 20-year-old collaboration with the Palace Bar. This was released last year, I think, or earlier this year. Who can even keep track? Nobody. Nobody. All right, let's open this. Boop. Kristen's still pitching for a job non-stop. I told you how to be creative about getting a job in the whiskey industry, Kristen. I'd love to know if you've done any of those things I suggested to get the attention of the whiskey brands. I believe in you. I know you can do it. Okay, so this is a 20-year-old Dunville single malt. It is aged in bourbon barrels and finished in Oloroso casks, Oloroso sherry casks. It is one of how many bottles? Couldn't tell you. This is bottle number 122. This was bottled in 2021. Okay, so last year, yeah, I was right. And then cask number 1639, and the cask was selected by Willie Ahern, the owner of the Palace Bar. 55% ABV. Lovely. All right, so we'll let that breathe for a minute. We'll have a little quick nose. It's quite restrained so far, although it's showing up. We'll give it a minute there. We'll leave it there for a second. All right, the ruffians we have down as a to-do. We're going to come back to that. I like it. I'll have to delegate it, but it'll be delegated and it'll be done. We're going to figure this out. I've got an idea on that. Okay, so Martin's happy to see the live stream back. Martin, I'm happy to be back on the live stream. Like I mentioned last week, I have trouble with extremes. I'm either all in or all out until somebody tells me, you can be somewhere in the middle, and I don't realize that until somebody tells me. And so I am halfway between. So I was either do a 4-hour lock-in, drink 16 whiskeys, collapse on the couch, and afterwards, or I was like, no, I can't do a live stream, and then there's nothing. This is a well-advised interim, or not an interim, but rather a middle ground, where I can come on for an hour or two, have a whiskey or two, have the crack. We didn't need the 4 hours to begin with, and there's no singing. Don't be asking for singing. And then all of our guests we'd have into our whiskey club. So it allows me to kind of separate things because we can't do everything. You've only got 16 hands, but this is nice. Once a week, it's lovely. It's great, and I'm having such crack seeing all your comments here. Really am. Good man, Greg Anderson, joining me with this one. He is bottle number 239. Fantastic. Cheers to you, Greg, and cheers to all of you for whatever's in your glass. Look at that lovely color. Wonderful, wonderful color. No, Cheryl, there's no singing. You're in the wrong room. Wrong room. You're all offering to be assistants and throw yourselves into the work. A wee lock-in, if you please. It is a wee lock-in, but it's the Shebeen. Cheers, everyone. Mother of God. I just had a sip of everything from tobacco to grapefruit to strawberry juice, juiced strawberries, to a effervescent. It's almost like this is fizzy. The tingling on the tongue, the white pepper spice on this is tremendous. Oh, that wood coming through. Those wood notes are coming through on the nose. It's really rich, really decadent. Not unlike it's a bit lighter in character than the Friend at Hand release, which was aged and finished in Oloroso and PX casks. This is just Oloroso casks. Very fragrant perfume, kind of like a lovely potpourri of everything from rose petals to raisins. I was running the gamut there on flavors and on the nose. Do you think it was carbonated? Effervescence. Almost like a rye spice. Kind of medium length, raisin sultanas, dark, kind of pruny, almost like a pruny note coming through there at the end as well. Almost something that you'd expect from a PX cask, which isn't part of the finish on this. That's a tremendous drop. Okay. So let's go back and talk about some of the rest of the things. We're 21. We just did 21 slides. I got about 10 more to go. We put this up here. So I want to give a reminder to those of you who have not heard me mention 100 million times about our upcoming event in Cleveland, Ohio in 3 weeks' time. Festival of Midleton Whiskies, December 5th and 6th. We are sold out of the waiting list for night number 1. We have a couple of places left for night number 2. This is the event of the year in Ohio, without a doubt. It is our 2nd annual Festival of Midleton Whiskies. I'm co-hosting this event with Midleton Master Distiller Kevin O'Gorman, who's flying to the United States for this event. It's his first ever time in the United States as Master Distiller. He's going to be co-hosting both nights. We'll both be wearing tuxedos and bow ties and dressed to the nines to usher in the wonderful whiskies of Midleton over both nights. Night number 1, we'll be serving Redbreast Kentucky Oak, Redbreast PX, Blue Spot, Redbreast 27, a couple of other samples. I can hint at the sample at night number 1. It is a 27 to 28-year-old sample of something that has never been seen before. People who are there for night number 1 are going to get that unbelievable sample straight from a cask at the Midleton warehouse, which Kevin will bring with him. We are doing this event not for the good of our health or just to sell whiskey, but rather to raise money, vital funds, for a charity in Cleveland called Malachy House. And Malachy House is a very well-known charity. They do tremendous work helping those who have no one to help them at the end of their lives. The homeless population, those who are terminally ill, who have no friends, no family, no relatives around them, who have run the risk of not having even a dignified death. And the Malachy House takes care of those people at the end of their life, ensures that they are surrounded by others, that they get a burial, that they are treated with dignity and respect, and we're raising money to allow them to do more of that. And we hope to raise a lot of money. And that's why we're charging a lot of money for tickets, because we want to raise a lot of money. So we still have a couple of tickets left for our 2-night event at $3,500 a ticket. And the reason they are that price is because we will be opening a bottle of the 47-year-old $46,000 bottle of Midleton Very Rare Silent Distillery. You see it there on the screen, chapter number 3. It has never, ever, ever been opened in the United States. There is no public tasting of this that has taken place in the United States. You'd struggle to find a public tasting of this anywhere in the world. There are only 97 bottles of it in existence. And thanks to you all, there'll be 96 of them left by the time we're finished with this event in 3 weeks' time. If you'd like to go, you can go to festivalofwhiskies.com. If you can't spring for a $3,500 ticket, as most of us can't, but you would like to still go to night number 1, we have a raffle where you can win actually both nights. You can win a chance to be seated at both nights. That is a $100 ticket, and we only are selling 200 of them. So that'll raise $20,000 directly to go to Malachy House. 100% of the money raised there goes to Malachy House. So go to festivalofwhiskies.com if you have an interest. I can hint and share with you now that those who are lucky enough to be there on night number 2, which will be a maximum of 20 people, it could be 16, it could be 20 people, maximum of 20 people will taste this whiskey. They will also taste a 35-year-old sample of something unbelievable from the Midleton warehouse. And I'm not going to tell you what it is because Kevin wants me to keep it a secret, but there'll be a 35-year-old cask strength sample of something that you will taste on the night number 2 as well. So we've been getting great coverage on this event over the past week and have managed to shift more tickets and increase our waiting list for night number 1. We've been featured on newspapers and magazines online all week, from Newsweek to the Sunday World to a local one in Cork, all because of one interview. Really, I did one interview on Friday with Newsweek, and that interview got picked up by tons of different outlets, Irish Central and tons of others online. So we've been getting a lot of traction and interest this week. I know some of you have shared links to this article shared links to this story. And I think the fact that the words police, $50,000 and Irish whiskey were included in headlines seem to have got attention and seem to have got traction. So that's coming up on December 5th and 6th. And I still have to get the answer when are we drawing the raffle on that. Rick, that's a great question. We will get the answer when the raffle is being drawn, but please get a ticket for the raffle if you can. They're $100, and yeah, I'm flying over to Cleveland for it. Kevin's flying to Cleveland for it, and it's going to be fantastic. Some local channel popped up, and there were pictures of Dave and Jeff and a few Brians around the table. Yeah, so there was some sharing of the video from last year. Local Fox 8 News in Cleveland, the news crew looked for some footage from last year, which we shared with them. And so some of you probably featured in some of this coverage and you didn't even know it. I know some of you are going to be there on both nights, which is fantastic. Okay. Your comments are coming in thick and fast. I'm going to find out when that raffle is, and I will get those answers tomorrow. So I'll update you on that tomorrow. Okay, so here's another event that we are going to be part of, and that is the Blackwater Distillery official global launch, and you're going to have a chance to be part of it yourselves. So the Cologne Distillery of the South is Blackwater Distillery. So you know the way the Cologne Distillery is all about mash bills and vintage mash bills and reworking the technical file that describes what Irish whiskey is and submitting their suggestions on what it should be. That work is not just something that's been done by the nice folks, Brendan Carty up in Cologne alone. It's also with other independent distillers, some of whom who don't have as big an audience or who haven't got as cultish a following as the Cologne cult. But one such distillery is in County Waterford. And for those of you who have been following along with my work over the past couple of years, you'll know that I'm a big fan of what's happening in Waterford, the county, vis-a-vis Waterford Distillery, primarily, but also Blackwater Distillery, which is right on the Cork border, and it is another Waterford distillery. Blackwater is releasing their first ever whiskies on November 30th, and they have been very hard to work. They have an American distiller, John Wilcox, and he has been experimenting for the past number of years, 3 or 4 years, on vintage mash bills, trying to bring back old mash bills from the 1800s, 1900s. Blackwater Distillery just collaborated with Cologne on the release of a poitín together. So the two of them have a shared philosophy on mash bills and approaches. I've tasted some of their new make spirit. Found it very interesting. I found it very flavorful. They now have 4 whiskies that they're ready to release. 4. So they are releasing 4 as their 4 inaugural whiskies rather than releasing 1, because they want people to see the difference between all of the different mash bills, the different styles. They want to understand the crazy experimentation that they've been doing in really, really small batches in the distillery. So they've asked me if I would be so kind as to host their launch event, which is a virtual global launch, if I would host a tasting for them. And I said, I will on one condition, that you give some of our members access to that whiskey too. We can't be giving you something for nothing. And so they said, well, what do you have in mind? They said, well, as many samples of the whiskey that you can give us, we want to get them for our club members so that they can follow along with the tasting. Now, they have very limited amounts of the whiskey, but they have agreed to make available 20 sets. So 24 packs of whiskey are going to be available to our club members. 24 packs. So you're going to get 20 members of our club are going to get a sample of each of the 4 whiskies that are going to be released. You're going to get a book, which is their manifesto, a 67-page book written by Peter Mulryan, the owner of the distillery, the founder of the distillery. He has written a manifesto for his belief in what Irish whiskey should be. He's a published author, a well-known author on Irish whiskey history himself. Fionnán O'Connor has been involved in the work there historically as well. And you'll get 4 samples of the whiskey, and you'll get a book written by Peter, which is his manifesto for his releases. We're going to host this event on November 30th, 8 p.m. Irish time. How do you get hold of one of these sets, I ask you? It's very simple. We're going to run a ballot for it. We're going to pull 20 club members' names out of a draw, out of a hat of those of you who have an interest in joining and participating. There's one caveat. You have to be available to join the tasting. Why? Because we want your feedback. We want you to fill out a form afterwards to tell us what you thought. Did you enjoy it? What did you like? What didn't you like? What resonated? What didn't? That's it. But you have to be there, and it's early. It's 3 p.m. American time on November 30th. So I'll be sharing details of this with you early next week. And we have 2 ballots happening next week. One is for our JJ Corrie whiskey, which I'll talk about in a second. And the second is for the Dirt Grain Irish whiskey. I think it's a great name, Dirt Grain. And it's the name of their whiskey brand. Again, the second distillery in Waterford, not to use the E in the spelling of whiskey, you'll notice. So 4 samples of Blackwater's whiskey called Dirt Grain will be winging their way. They will be shipping from Ireland within a week. So we'll be running this very quickly. It'll be a 48-hour ballot. I'll send out the details probably tomorrow or Tuesday, and we'll get those names wrapped up. And that's it. So if you don't get these whiskies, you can still join our virtual event because it'll be streaming on the Blackwater Distillery Facebook page. So it'll still go out at November 30th, on November 30th at 8 p.m. Irish time, 3 p.m. Eastern. So you can all join in as much as you want, but only those with the who are lucky in the ballot will have a sample of the whiskey. After that, the whiskey will be available to purchase. The kits will be available to purchase from those who want to purchase them afterwards once they go on sale on Irish malls or Celtic Whiskey Shop or wherever they decide to sell them. So that's really exciting because more and more distilleries are recognizing the value in having us involved and getting Stories and Sips and the Whiskey Club and our wonderful palates that you all have involved. And they like the feedback. And you see what the likes of Dunville's reaching out and offering up some access to whiskies. Now Blackwater offering up some access. We want more of this, don't we? So again, I will add the caveat. Please don't enter this if you can't be there on the day. It will take away from the event. It'll take away from the excitement because we want people to have the whiskey who can give feedback on it. You'll be part of a very small number of people who will have that whiskey for the launch. Like only 100 people in the world will have that whiskey. 20 of those people will be in our club. That's a huge deal for us as a whiskey club. So again, I would stress that while everyone would like to get a sample, they can try at their own time. If you're not going to be there, don't go for a sample because I'm going to have to be a bit strict on this one and say, look, if you get samples and you just don't turn up, it might affect your chances for the next ballot, which you'll understand. So it's just a little bit of quid pro quo. They give us something, we give them something in return. And I'm sure you all understand that. It will be, we'll do Facebook and YouTube, Mark, I think. Does Blackwater have a YouTube page? If they do, we'll go out on that as well. I'm sure they do. YouTube, Blackwater Distillery. I bet they do. If they do, we'll get that sorted. They do, yeah. So we'll go out on their YouTube and their Facebook. We'll go out on the 2 of them. Yeah. That's pretty cool, right? Jason wanting to pick everything up in person. Jason, I wish I had the logistics to arrange independently with everybody how they could get their unique version of delivery and collection, but my logistical abilities, the resources aren't there, I'm sorry to say. The reason that it's hard, I know some of you say, hey, if I order this thing, can I pick it up at the place? Distilleries and brands don't have whiskies typically at their distillery. They're bottled elsewhere. They go from their bottling to a retailer, and the distillery themselves doesn't make things available typically for pickup. Typically, I say typically, there are exceptions to the rule. For example, you can't even buy whiskey at some distilleries. So no, it's not typically possible to pick things up in person. So the logistics chain, supply chain is just set up for a particular route, which is in this case shipping. So if you're available on that time, we'll put out the links for that ballot this week. Mark says that Facebook might be out of business by then. Yeah, Facebook might be gone. Twitter might be gone. We might be doing this live stream by semaphore before the end of the month if things keep going in the tech world like they're going. All right. Whiskey Club updates. All right, let's get to this Cliffs of Moher Whiskey for all of you folks who are interested. So I apologize for the delay, the week-long delay we've had in launching our ballot for our whiskey from the Cliffs of Moher. Let me start by not burying the lead and saying the whiskey is available and is ready for the ballot. Okay, woohoo! Everything's ready. And now let's talk about the details as to why it wasn't available and what happens next. Just an hour before I was due to go live last week with the ballot, we got word that we've got an interesting thing with our whiskey here. This is an interesting whiskey, and some of you will know the story, some of you won't. We have collaborated with JJ Corrie, the whiskey bonder located in County Clare. We embarked on a really interesting project at the end of July, beginning of August, to further age casks of whiskey, quarter casks of whiskey, atop the Cliffs of Moher. The Cliffs of Moher, 700 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, facing west, waving at America. And there's a tower on top of the cliffs called O'Brien's Tower. And there we put in 9 casks, 9 50-litre casks of whiskey. And those 90-litre casks, 50-litre casks, 9 50-litre casks of whiskey spent about 2, almost 3 months maturing, finishing in very different climatic conditions above the cliffs than they were in previously for their 5.5, 6 years in JJ Corrie's warehouses. So they experienced pressure changes, they experienced moisture changes, they experienced temperature changes on the cliffs, and it advanced the speed at which the wood and the whiskey, the liquid, interacted, and it created really interesting whiskies. We selected from the 9, we selected 3 single casks. These were the standouts. Some of you here, Rick, Cheryl, Kristen, you were there. You were on the cliffs. You tasted them on the cliffs. Some of you tasted them in New York, also Rick, and they really performed amazingly. These cliffs, these are the first ever whiskies that are ever aged on the Cliffs of Moher. It's the first time the Cliffs of Moher have allowed the use of their name. Now we're paying them a little commission for the use of their name, some royalties back to them to allow them to fund their projects on the Cliffs of Moher. A few dollars from each bottle goes to the Cliffs of Moher, and a few other firsts. JJ Corrie has never released a single cask. We're now getting 3 of them. JJ Corrie has never released a single pot still. We're getting 1 cask of it. These are firsts. So we're trying to do something with every cask release, with every club release that's different, that's interesting, be it a first, be it something unique, be it something very different, something noteworthy, something we can talk about, something we can taste that's really interesting. And these are such whiskies. We brought these 3 whiskies with us to New York. I think 80 of you or 100 of you tasted them in person in New York as well. And all was declared to be well when you tasted them. And we are now making them available to our club members. And they will be shipped from Cork within, we think, the next 8 to 9 days. We think we can get it done. Maybe 10 days. So tomorrow we'll put the ballot live. So why are we doing a ballot? Well, there's 210 bottles have been yielded from the casks. We don't only have 210 members. We have more members than that in our club. So not everyone will get a bottle. And certainly not everybody will get 3 bottles. It would be lovely in an ideal world where there were 3 bottles available for everybody. But there weren't enough of the whiskies we thought were ready of the 9 casks. And so I'd rather not choose 9 whiskies where some were great and some weren't. I'd rather choose the best and then make them available. I think everyone's going to get a bottle. I think based on the percentage of take up that we have for our quarterly tastings and for our bottle share, our bottle previous bottling, I think we have enough for a bottle for everybody. So here's what's going to happen. This goes live tomorrow as a ballot, and I'll share some details on it. So let me put this up on the screen. These are the 3. These are not quite the finished labels. There's some changes that have been made. We have a 6-year-old pot still whiskey that is finished in an Oloroso sherry cask. We have a 6-year-old single malt that was finished in a Palo Cortado cask. And we have a 6-year-old single malt that was finished in a Pedro Jimenez cask. All 3 very different and really, really good whiskies. And whiskies that I can stand behind and JJ Corrie can stand behind. And they are the product of a new sherry cask program from JJ Corrie that is a 10-year cask program that began 3 or 4 years ago when they started sourcing new and different sherry casks that they could use for finishing, for full maturations, for recaskings, etc. How we're going to do this is we're going to put this live tomorrow where and I'll pull up the tab because I'll show you the form that's going to go live. Pull it down here. So I'm going to share the tabs. Let me stop sharing this one and I'll share a different screen. Okay, so this is the ballot. So if you're a member of the club, you'll get an email tomorrow to a member-only page. You'll have to log in, of course, and then you'll see a list down here. You have to put in your name, you put in your email address, and then you will see. Let me make sure you can see this full screen. Make it even bigger for you. Okay, go back to it. So in here is a list of the cask numbers, the ABV, and the tasting notes of each. I'll also include here before tomorrow, Kristen, I know you asked me about this, which order were these tasted in New York. I'll add that in here so you know if there was, I love the second one, I love the third one. I'll put that in here as well, all right? So, for example, the Pedro Jimenez cask finish for the 6-year-old single malt knows dark fruit jam like Welch's raspberry jam, morning coffee, but dark on the palate, peppery, cinnamon, hit right up front, gives way to chocolate first, dark, then milk, a fantastic chewy mouthfeel. The finish, lovely honey and caramel. And these are Louise's notes. This one really changes from nose to palate, in like a lion, out like a lamb. How about that? So each of them will have the tasting notes and the ABV, the cask number. And what you'll do is, of the 3 whiskeys that are here, you'll simply type in which one you have your first choice is. So if you want the Pedro Jimenez cask to be the first choice, you'll just type in here in this field here, number 1. That's my first choice, a bit like voting. Number 2, you'll type that in here, and your third choice or your third preference here, you'll type in number 3. That's it. You'll just choose in order of preference which ones you want. And what we'll do is we'll try and fulfill all the first preferences first. So that's my wonderful job. Is I'm going to work through that system and go through the list and try and pair everyone to their first preference. If we have, let's say, only 170 people after we close the ballot. So we'll run the ballot for 72 hours, maybe Monday to Thursday, I'm thinking, and I'll advertise this widely. If we only have 170 people say, here's my first preference, and we give everyone the first preference, that means we now have the option for you to get your second preference. So then what we'll do is we'll put you all back in to the ballot and we'll draw out the names, and then we'll give you the chance to get the second one as well. You don't have to buy the first or the second, but then I have to figure out all the madness around sending you the right links, right? So don't worry about that. I'll figure that out. But that's the fairest way to do it, I think. And tell me if I'm wrong or I'm crazy, but that's the fairest way. Now it's for the club only, the whiskey club only. So you're still a chance to be in here, in with a chance to win if you join the club. And now some of you are saying, well, I've been a club member for a year, I should get first chance. Well, we're kinder than that. And we allow everyone who's part of the club to participate. If you're a part of the club, you'll be in with a chance. And to join, just go to storiesandsip.com and you can join in the ballot. So first preference, you just put it in number 1, second preference, number 2, and third preference. So there is a scenario where you might get 3 bottles if you want them, right? I mean, it's a scenario. We don't know. Once we've done the ballot and once we've worked through the preference and once we have enough allocated, here's what we're going to do next. We're then going to prepare links to send you all that allow you to make that purchase. You'll then have 24 hours to make your purchase. If you don't make your purchase in 24 hours, we move on to the next person on the ballot who didn't get the chance of their first preference or their second preference or whatever it is. We figure all that out. It'll be fair. It'll be democratic. It'll be a nightmare for me to manage, but we're going to do it because it's worth it. And you'll get links to buy it. It'll be through our own web shop, which we are developing separate to the web shop that we have right now. And it'll all be fulfilled through a licensed retail partner in Ireland who will then ship to you. So we are subsidizing your membership fees are subsidizing the shipping cost already. Okay. So shipping from Ireland to the US, if I was to get a spot quote for 1 bottle today, is $52 from Ireland to the US. You'll pay $25 and your club membership will subsidize the rest, right? So your dues that you pay each month go into a pot that help us fund the club and help us pay for things like this. I think that's fair. It means we can get whiskeys to you quickly. And it means that next year, if this works, we can roll out 10 releases in the next year that no one else in the world can get. And we can do them in the same way. All going to plan. Nothing goes to plan. But that's what we're going to try, right? That's what we're going to try. Everyone says it's very fair. Okay. Well, 2 of you say it's fair. And Martin wants 2 of each. Of course you do. I wish you could get 2 of each. No, and there's no backroom deals now. Don't be doing any deals with Louise looking for quick access. Before anything gets shipped, we'll review the list. We'll make sure that non-club members have not infiltrated. They wouldn't be possible anyway, because we have ways of figuring that out, and we have some interesting code that has been developed and plugins that have been developed for us. So it's our first time trying this also, so you're gonna have to bear with us, but we're setting aside time to manage this over the next week, and hopefully we'll get it done. And technical team are working through this at the moment, so we'll do our best to figure it out. Okay, so that is what is happening with our next whiskey release. So that, okay, what was the delay? So I saw somebody asking. Okay, so the delay was, you'll notice that these are called the Cliffs of Moher Whiskey and not the Cliffs of Moher Irish Whiskey. So by law in Ireland, in order to be called an Irish whiskey, the spirit must be aged in a bonded warehouse for a minimum of 3 years, 36 months technically, and on the island of Ireland, a bonded warehouse. And it can then, that is some of the criteria. Once it meets those criteria, it can be called Irish whiskey. Our whiskies met those criteria. They spent 6 years aging in a bonded warehouse. When we took them from the bonded warehouse and we put them into the Cliffs of Moher, their status has been deemed to have changed. The Department of Agriculture, which oversees the label approval in Ireland, pushed back on the claims of it being allowing it to use the category Irish whiskey because it left the bonded warehouse before it was bottled. Now, there's actually an argument to be made that they're incorrect because of the wording in the file that specifies that it must spend at least 36 months in a bonded warehouse. It did, but it broke in the eyes of the Department of Agriculture, and I'm not a legal expert, and I'm sure somebody will weigh in and say, Barry, you're wrong. They broke it in another way too. In any case, the Department of Agriculture said it meets the European criteria for whiskey. Of course, you can give you the label for whiskey, but Irish, the Cliffs of Moher is not a bonded warehouse, so we're not giving you the word Irish. Okay, the whiskey still tastes the same. We still think it's Irish. You can get a Sharpie and write it on yourself if you want. But that's what happened. Was that was all fine. We went to print with the labels, or we're about to print the labels, and then the local health service in County Clare, who had been sent copies of the labels as an FYI, wanted clarification. And the person who wanted clarification submitted a request for clarification and then went on vacation. And they weren't going to be back for like 3 days. And so we had to stop and pause. And I thought, well, look, there's no point in running the ballot if something's going to change materially to the release. And so we held off on the release until we got clarity. So there was a lot of frantic phone calls, and Louise and Niamh at JJ Corrie, I'm sure, are sick of hearing from me. And Louise is in New York at the moment, and Niamh is traveling in London, and they'll never take a call from me again, I'd say. But we have to get our whiskey. So we've gone back and forth, and we've rectified and solved all the problems. And so we can now go live. We can get this ballot up, and we can have the cracker on the ballot, and then we can get a date for the tasting, and hopefully we can ship the whiskey in the next 10 days, probably around the same time that we'll ship the packs for the dirt grain whiskey from Blackwater. And some of you might be getting both of them if you're lucky. Who knows? Who knows? All right. So we're testing, like I said, we're testing a new route to market, a new supply chain, which is sending it from Ireland directly to you. I know many of you get your whiskies that way already. You get them from Celtic Whiskey Shop, you get them from James Fox, you get them from Irish Malts, you get them from Irish Whiskey Auctions. So why shouldn't Stories and Sips try something like that? So basically you will be purchasing, and obviously, look, the retailer we'll be using can ship to all states. You as the buyer assume responsibility for receiving it in your state. It's not our responsibility to get it to you, the usual drill, no different than you order it online right now. Your state laws differ wildly from one another, but from our perspective, we're shipping it from a licensed retailer from Ireland, and you'll make your purchase accordingly. So that's the legal kind of bit, but any of you will kind of know that already. All right. Let me have a look at your comments there. Andrew says they were outstanding in New York. Can't wait until bottles. Good man, Andrew. Jeff says that's some Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universal Level of Bureaucracy. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's. I tell you, the things I'm learning about how the alcohol industry works and the government works in Ireland is amazing. We could write a book on it. Maybe some ruffians need to visit the Department of Agriculture. Yeah, we'll get a great name for ourselves now if we start turning up at baseball bats at the Department of Agriculture. That'll do it. Yeah, so Tom with the comment about the argument from the Department of Agriculture being incorrect, that it needs to be matured in Ireland for 36 months to be Irish whiskey. So where it, like most things, it comes down to a word, right? The Department of Agriculture would have sufficient grounds to argue the case that the language says a minimum of 36 months. And that separately within the guide, it says that it must be aged in a bonded warehouse in Ireland, right? That they could make the argument that it did age for 36 months, but it didn't age completely in a bonded warehouse. And they'd be right to defend that. I think they'd be right to defend that. Our argument could be around the same thing, which is, well, we're saying that one piece of the guide says, or the file, the European law directive says that we met the 36 months criteria. But when we took it outside of that, it should have still retained its 36 months. It didn't yet leave the island of Ireland. I think the legal scholars amongst you will see the merits of both sides. But who wants to be involved in that? Like, who wants to be involved in that battle? We just want our whiskey. So we're going to just say, no problem. We're going to go, that's grand. We're going to tip the hat. You're welcome. Grand. Off we go. And we'll take the whiskey, and that's it. And we'll be done with it. Do you know? Because honestly, do you know where these labels are going to be in a month's time? At the bottom of a bin, because you'll all have drank your whiskey and we won't even be worried about it. So I don't mind. I think it adds to the story, because now it's the first ever, again, it's not our first. It's the first whiskey release in our club. It's not Irish whiskey. It's just whiskey. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. David asks, will there be a chance for those of you in Ireland to try it? If you're a club member, Dave, you have as much chance of getting it as anybody else. There's no other whiskey available. It's only 70 bottles per cask. So there's no tastings happening in Ireland. There's no samplings happening in Ireland. There's no miniatures of it happening in Ireland. It's a really limited release. And so sadly, we can't do anything big with it in Ireland. But we have Irish members, we have UK members, we have European members. We'll be able to ship to all of them. So if you're a member or you're trying to be a member, we'll ship to anywhere that will receive deliveries from our retailer in Ireland. So there's no problem there. Tony worked for the government. He's here to help. Well, Tony, if dealings with the government so far are anything to go by, you'll be no help at all. Yeah, Tom, I see your points 100%. It can be frustrating. All right. There's no doubt about it, about how the system works with labeling, etc. We wouldn't be the first to run into trouble. Okay. So let us move on from that. So here's the dates now. So these are if all goes to plan. So tomorrow, it's already tomorrow my time now. You better go to bed. The ballot will open to register interest. And then on November 17th, they will be dressing the bottles in County Clare with the labels. November 18th, they'll be shipping them down to Cork, where I will drink them all and you'll have nothing left. Haha. And whatever's left on November 21st, we will open up online ordering in other words, we will give you the links to make your online orders. That is assuming the labels ship tomorrow. The labels ship tomorrow. The dressing of the bottles happen on the 17th, and that they're shipped on the 18th. And then they'll probably arrive on the 19th or 20th, and then online ordering will begin, and then hopefully we'll ship that week, all going to plan. And then end of November or after Thanksgiving, certainly, or whenever we can fit it in, we'll find the online tasting with Louise. If you've opened your bottles before then, no problem. But still, we'll find a tasting event with Louise, but it is tight with the end of year, with everyone traveling and our events in Cleveland coming up, but we'll make it all happen. Okay? We will make it all happen. All right. So I did tease last week some other things we're working on. So we're working on other whiskies. There's no point in us stopping now. We're only starting to get things figured out. We're a year into our club. We're learning things. We're growing. We're whiskey distilleries and brands are interested in working with us. I teased last week our next whiskey and I asked you all to guess it, and some of you guessed it, some of you didn't. But our next whiskey, all going to plan, will be a collaboration with Short Cross Whiskey, with Redemin Estate in Northern Ireland, and it'll be a gold medal winner at the Irish Whiskey Awards that won the best single malt Irish whiskey under 11 years of age, or gold medal under 11 years of age, and that is the single malt, peated 6-year-old single malt that we tasted on the whiskey bus, and I called it the best whiskey of the 69 whiskeys we tried on the whiskey bus. We're getting the first cask of it. We're getting the only single cask that they'll release. We're getting it, and that's going to be our next whiskey. And I'm excited for it, because I'm excited to take us all on a peated journey. If you're not a peated fan, don't worry. This will be something that will help you fall in love with peat. It is chocolate. It is orange. It is a cask. It is a whiskey that is a single malt that's aged entirely in an ex-cognac cask that used to also contain an orange liqueur. So think dark chocolate orange, think wonderful citrus fruits, think creaminess, and think of this wonderful smoky coating to it. So that is the whiskey that we're working on releasing next. It'll be January. The labels are a nightmare. Again, logistics the world over. Why the labels are nightmares? Because there's a foil on these labels. It's kind of a gold foil, and there's a shortage of gold. So we are working on that label. So that's whiskey that we're working on next. It is a fantastic, fantastic, fantastic whiskey. And I'm so excited that David, Boyd Armstrong, the co-owner, together with Fiona, he was at the Whiskey Awards in Dublin this week. I was able to chat to David about it. And I went up and I shook his hand and I said, "Congratulations on the award, David." And he goes, "You know which whiskey it was, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, it was our peated cask, wasn't it?" He said, "It was. You just won gold medal at the Irish Whiskey Awards." So how lucky are we that we're getting access to that? It's already been submitted for an award. It's won it. It's got a gold medal. So really excited that we're going to be the ones that get that. So as soon as we get labeling on that, we'll move as fast as we can to release that in January. So hopefully you'll have that in January. That'll be our next Whiskey Club release, working on pricing, working on making sure we can get that done for you. So it's really interesting. I'm a new to peat whiskey drinker. I'm absolutely insufferable now to anybody who listens to me. I talk about peated whiskies like I invented the stuff. I'm surrounded by peat everywhere I go. Look, I can't move for different peated whiskies. That's not peated. There was the other peated somewhere. Anyway, if I can be converted, I have hope for all of you. Hope for all of you. Right. So that's one we're working on. Okay. Another one we're working on. So I'm sipping on a nice little whiskey right now that had a lovely green label on it. Guess what we're getting? We're getting a Dunville single cask. Dun, dun, dun. All right, we're working on that with Jarlath and Stephen up in Ecklenville. We are working on not just one single cask release, but hopefully many more to come. Not just one, but many more to come. So that is our next release in the pipe. And again, these could get reordered depending on logistics, depending on timelines, but we have a Dunville's, and that's an amazing thing. This conversation for a Dunville's cask started a long time ago. I remember when there was a single cask released maybe a year and a half ago. I remember Dave Borquez there in our group reaching out to Dunville saying, "You need to do one for Stories and Sips." And they said they'd love to, but it was one of those things where nothing ever came of it. Timing was off. We couldn't continue a conversation. We got busy. They got busy. The whiskey bus went to Ecklenville. We had a fantastic time. They were blown away by the interest, by you all. And I remember Jarlath Watson from Ecklenville joining our whiskey bus and pouring whiskey for us as we drove back to Belfast. He had the time of his life with us. And I said to Jarlath out that night, and where were we? We were inside the Duke of York pub drinking Dunville's. And I leaned into Jarlath and I said, "We have to get a single cask, don't we?" He said, "Oh, Barry, you do. You have to get your single cask." And so conversation started there, continued there. And we've been having conversations over the past few weeks. Chatted to the lads up in Dublin at the Irish Whiskey Awards at 1:00 in the morning in the Palace Bar. And between Stephen and Jarlath, they're like, "We got to get this done. Let's get this done." Stephen's very excited. Stephen's he's working on their brand and their corporate sales side of things. And Stephen really wants to take care of our group. He's joined many of he's been an observer of our lock-ins and our shebeens and is a big fan of our club. So he wants to get something special done. So this would be a very different release to the others because we'd be going up in the age statements. And I think, that brings us up in pricing, but there's no way around that. So I'm looking at an age range. I'm looking at 4 samples that are coming my way that range in age from 17 to 21 years of age. So I'm going to evaluate, and I'm going to get a couple of other people to help me evaluate the 17 to 21-year-old whiskies that come from 2 different distilleries. 2 different distilleries, put it that way. They're single malts, so I guess you can guess which distilleries they come from. And we're going to evaluate them, and we're going to talk about them, and I'll keep you posted on the journey. But this is a big deal. Like, this is a big deal for us. A big deal for us. Brian says, glad to know that Barry's not just sitting around drinking whiskey in his library. I'm not I am, but but I'm not at the same time, if you know what I mean. Like, I'm doing it because it's my work, you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, imagine now Dunville's with a Stories and Sips name on the bottle and a green label. Jared said, do you want a red label or do you want a green label? I said, well, what's the difference? Because I didn't know at the time I asked him. He said, well, green label means that it's only available in one place. And I said, well, that pretty much qualifies us, doesn't it? He said, all right, Barry, it does. So green label Dunville's, if we can figure it out. Now, again, I've not seen any pricing yet. And I'm sad. I scolded Stephen in Dublin for not having sent the pricing information on before they scooped up 6 bloody awards in Dublin, because I bet they've gone back to that Excel sheet now and have reconfigured it based on awards. God bless them. But in any case, we'll work on. They want to make this work for us, so I think it'll all work out. We'll get this done, and yeah, we'll absolutely get this done. Every club bottling should come with a turtleneck sleeve. If you're willing to add $20 per sleeve, we'll get it done. We can absolutely get it done. We looked into it actually for the craic, and we couldn't get them done. We couldn't get sleeves made in America for less than $20 a sleeve. We couldn't get sleeves made in China in time, 6-month lead time on sleeves. I know Proper Number 12 has little hoodies that come with some of his different numbers, different volumes, different marketing budgets, let me assure you. But it'd be lovely if we could do it. It'd be nice, wouldn't it? Kristen's still pitching for a secretary role there. Kristen, we await your creativity at trying to secure a job beyond the comments section of the live stream. But I have every faith in you. Price won't matter on this one. Who said that? Dave. That's it. We're putting Dave down for 50 of them. Lauren says I'm nailing the northern accent there. Lauren, I've spent enough time with you to nail the northern accent. I'm even saying the word we all the time now. Dave said, I thought it was Jared himself. All right, let's keep going. Brian wants to know, what did my turtleneck go for last year on the Irish whiskey auctions? I don't know, 400 or something? Something ridiculous. Okay, let's fly through these. I want to talk about pricing. Meet the Maker event. You saw our last Meet the Maker event at Maurice O'Connell. His whiskey launched last week. Go check that out on our Stories and Sips Club website, storieandsips.com. What else? Our next upcoming Meet the Maker is with the Dead Rabbit team. Mark McLaughlin, director of Irish Whiskey, Jackie McGarry, founder. They are just about to announce 2 additional locations that they're about to open. So it brings the total to, I think, 5 locations they'll have by the end of 2023. They'll have New York, Austin, Texas, New Orleans, Louisiana, and then 2 more they haven't discussed yet. I think they'll talk about all 5 and all 4 of these new builds when they join us for Meet the Maker. It could be yet this month. I'll share details with you as soon as we have it. That's our next Meet the Maker. Interview with Deirdre O'Carroll, a chat with Deirdre O'Carroll, the blender from Irish Distillers. Goes on the website. It was supposed to go on the website this week, but it didn't with all of our delays. It goes on the website tomorrow, and I'll share the link to that. Deirdre is responsible for putting together the component whiskies that make up Jameson Single Pot Still. She works on Redbreast with Billy Lighton and Dave McCabe. She is responsible for overseeing the inventory numbers, enough supply for the next 40 years. God bless her. So that's going on our website. Okay. If you're not a member of our club, and if we haven't convinced you by now, we may never convince you. It's $20 a month to be part of our club. And in return, I sit in my library and drink whiskey. Isn't that right, Brian Redden? In return, we bring together events, people, whiskies, opportunities to participate in things, behind the scenes access, whiskey discounts, shipping discounts, Irish whiskey auctions, and more. And we're working on lots more things over the coming year to bring you, and you get a chance to get access to whiskeys that nobody else in the world gets. It's not for everybody. It's only for those who really want to enjoy Irish whiskey in a deeper way, who want to have maybe explore whiskeys with the people who make them, who want to meet those people in person, virtually, who want to perhaps broaden their horizons or expand their palates. I want to do that in an environment that's friendly, that's community driven, it's people driven. We're not a whiskey retailer. We're a community that happens to ship and sell whiskey to our partners. So we'd love to have you. Our club is open. We're taking members. There will come a point where we won't take any more members. In the next few months, we might reach that point, at which time we'll close membership off and we'll just maintain a certain membership level so long as we can get supply of whiskies to meet everybody's needs. And then we might grow it again in the future. So we're not going to be open forever. We will have a cap on membership at some point because it needs to be manageable and everyone needs to get value out of their membership. If we run ballots and you lose out on 3 ballots in a row, you're not going to subscribe next month, nor should you, because you're not getting access to the whiskies. So I'm trying to avoid that scenario. So that's on me. So my job is to earn your $20 every month. And if you don't think I'm giving you value, you should unsubscribe. And I mean that most sincerely. Or you should ask for your money back. I'll give you your last month's money back, and you can find some other place to spend your hard-earned money. And I mean that most sincerely. Your membership means a lot to me. I do as much as I can to bring as much value to you. We're not stopping. We're not slowing down. I hope we've hinted at some of the amazing access we're getting, both virtually with our Meet the Maker events, but also with the whiskeys that we're getting access to. Again, these are for us. They're for nobody else. So we'd love to have you. If you're not part of the club, join. It's as simple as that. Okay, let us, oh yes, and if you're not a member of our Irish Whiskey Fans of America Facebook group, that will cost you near a penny, nothing. It's free. Go join. There's 10,000 people in there, 9,700 people in there, and it's great crack. I've not met a kinder bunch of people. There is no selling in there. There's no pitching. There's no spamming. There's no, it seems like a welcoming environment. Tell me if I'm wrong. We have a higher percentage. I think we have a better gender breakdown in there than we do externally in other whiskey groups. I don't see it as being this kind of a bro-led, whiskey environment that's all about flipping and things like that. It doesn't seem to be any of those things. It's a real welcoming environment, and it's there that we've grown the club from. And whether you ever join the club or not, you should join our Facebook group. All right. That's it. Rant over. Is that the end of the slides? That's the end of the slides. Okay. Now, let's talk pricing. But first, let me look at your comments. You all want West Coast events. West Coast. Yeah. Listen, there's lots of you in the West Coast. No doubt about it. I will not be making a West Coast event happen personally in the near future. Just logistically, it's not possible. There is a big reason I'm spending a lot of time in Ireland at the moment. It's so that I know, tough job, but it means it's so that I can go to events where I can meet the people who say to me, yes, you'll get a Dunbills. Yes, you'll get a 2 stacks. Yes, you'll get this couple of others we're working on. And that's important. I spend a lot of time in Ireland to do that. But there'll be US events over the next 12 months. There'll be at least 4 to 6 US events. They will be primarily East Coast. That will be a kind of a middle ground. So we'll find, I think New York is a place you can get in and out of relatively easily. And if we're off peak and in times of the week that are cheaper to stay there, there will be in-person events. Again, we never built the club to have in-person events. The club was built purely virtually. The in-person is just an added thing that we'll do when we can, but I can't commit to a limitless number of in-person events. They're an absolutely massive undertaking. But of course we want to get together, but just understand the restrictions. This is not a club with massive resources. And so we're restricted with what we can do. But it's not to say we can't do different things in the future. So hopefully you understand that. Kristen for the first time has offered to become secretary there, which is a new offer. Kristen, we've not heard that one yet tonight. Thank you. Listen, if you can get to Boston, you can get to New York. We'll see how we go. All right, let's talk about pricing. So the reason I Why did I even leave that to the end? I have two more things. Actually, you know what I'll do first? Let me draw the winners of our whiskey, of our totes. Tote bags, 4 tote bags. All right. So let me pull this up. I offered up 4 tote bags. They are little pure essentials of Ireland tote bags with a picture of Jameson and Barry's Irish tea and Beamish Irish stout and Beamish stout and Kerrygold butter and a whole bunch of things on it. I bought 4 of them from a local retailer, a local crafts person, a maker in Cork this week. So let's draw those winners and we'll put it up on the screen. Tony, I have no way of telling if you entered or not at this stage, but I will be running the draw now. So if you see your name, you definitely entered. Okay, here is the wheel of names. All right, and so all of your names are here. We're not going to go through them all, but what we'll do is, and I'll just scroll there. There's the names of the people who entered. I removed the 9 times some of you entered. You'll understand why. And we'll click here and we'll draw a name. All right, who's the first name? Who's the first name? Joshua Atzert. Congratulations, Joshua. First winner. All right, we'll remove Joshua so we can't win the next one. Right, next one. Whoop. Whoop. Caitlin Herbin. Congratulations. Caitlin Herbin, you're a winner. All right, remove you. Now we have 2 more to give away. Entries came in on Instagram and on Facebook. Wonder if we can get someone who's on here tonight. Jessica Corvez in Las Vegas. Jessica, congratulations. Congratulations to Jessica. All right, remove Jessica. And we'll do one more for the 4th bag, and I'll get all these shipped out to you this week. Oh, is that going to Brian Riley? Hey, Brian Riley in Ohio, in Columbus. Congratulations to Brian. All right, those are our winners. Okay. Lauren likes that the wheel cheers every time a winner is announced. Okay, so that's the wheel. What else was I going to do? Oh, yeah, it's the pricing. Let's talk about pricing. So, okay. So the first 2 whiskies we announced were released this week were Lambay Irish Whiskey and Sonny Malloy's Redbreast. And I think we both agree that maybe they're eyebrow-raising numbers, 560 to 600 euros for a 20-year-old Lambay, 595 euros for a 19-year-old Redbreast single cask from Sonny Malloy's. So I've got a bottle here that is a very sought-after bottle. It is a Jameson single pot still from 1999, and it was released just before the millennium. And it was a rare release because Jameson hadn't had a single pot still since 1970, 71, 72, when they closed the stills, turned off the stills in Bow Street in Dublin. And this was released in 1999 as I think it was about 80 euros at the time, or 80 pounds at the time. And it didn't sell. Like it didn't move. It was a distillery only release. And so little of it moved that 2 years after it was announced, after it was launched, Ger Garland, who's the Midleton brand ambassador, who many of you will be familiar with, he was working at the distillery at the brand at the time for Midleton, and his boss told him to do a deal where if people bought 2 of them, they could get a 3rd one free. That was how hard it was to move a whiskey that cost 80 pounds and was a 15-year-old single pot still at the time, back in 1999, 2000. We are in a completely different world today. Back then, Irish whiskey was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, about 10 to 15% the size of the market that it is today. In other words, it's almost 10x the size that it was, which means that the demand has increased 10x. And so what we're starting to see now is we are starting to see prices go through the roof for older whiskies and even younger whiskies that are being released for the first time. Let's start with the older whiskies, and I want to discuss this pricing because I've asked a few people about it this week and their thoughts on it, because whiskey's a funny thing. when the Sonny Malloy's Redbreast was released, there was consternation online, both on their Facebook page and in other forums, that this price was an insult to people. We saw comments like they were taking the proverbial pee, that they were out of their minds, that there was abusive pricing. They would never shop there again. And I'm fascinated by pricing factors, and I'm fascinated by thinking and emotions that are driven by pricing. And I was trying to think of another industry where if something was released that was outside of your price range, but you were a consumer of that thing, and let's use, for example, cars. So if you drive a Volkswagen Polo, a small Volkswagen Polo car, and you love Volkswagen, like you're a real Volkswagen fan, but suddenly Volkswagen releases the Phaeton, a V12 Volkswagen that comes out. That's 10 times the cost. Would you go online and complain or be upset that Volkswagen had a more expensive release? I don't think you would. And it begs the question, why do we do it with whiskey? Is it that we feel more emotionally connected to a brand, or that we have supported a brand, or that we feel connected personally and that we are owed something personally? Is it because we don't like the direction the pricing is going and it's only going in one direction, let's be honest? Or what is it? Why do we get so upset when something that is more expensive exists? Are we owed every whiskey? Should we be able to afford every whiskey? Are we getting upset that we can't afford every whiskey? Do we feel that by pricing something out of our price range, or being more expensive than a similar thing was historically, that it's a personal insult to us? Like, do I scream at the Volkswagen V12 Phaeton on the road if I only own a Volkswagen Polo? I don't think I do. But why do we do it with whiskey? And it's a question, and it's a dilemma that whiskey brands are facing right now. Older whiskies, rarer whiskies, and I mean rare in that older stock is not as plentiful as younger stock for obvious reasons. It takes longer to make it. It takes longer to get it to the point where it says 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 on the bottle. What if, as that stock matures, you're losing some, right? So you've got the Angels share. You're losing 2-3% every year to the Angels. You're after 20 years, you've lost 30-40% of your stock to evaporation. You've less of your stock. There's now more demand than ever than there was for Irish whiskies. Certainly aged Irish whiskies, mature Irish whiskies. So then you start pricing accordingly. And I think to a degree we understand that, but it seems like there's a price point at which people don't understand that, don't want to understand that, don't agree with it. And I'm going to take a position here that's completely neutral and completely in the middle and independent, and say, I don't care what a brand charges. I don't care, because I'll either buy it or I won't. But I'm fascinated by the decisions that are made and the subsequent consequences by that same pricing decision. So let's take, for example, Yellow Spot single cask that was released a couple of months ago. And I think that's a 400, maybe a €400, $400 single cask, maybe a little bit more, 500 is it? Single cask. And it's still available. It's still available to buy. There was a time where a Spot single cask didn't last a week. Is that a sign that there isn't the demand for a single cask at that price point for a Spot? Or what is it a sign of? Is it a sign that you've reached a threshold? And pricing elasticity is something that gets tested and gets evaluated, and brands will learn what's working or what there's a market for and what there's not a market for. So I understand when things get expensive because there's rarity. I also understand where there is exclusivity, that things are more expensive. And I understand when there is, so rarity, age, exclusivity, yeah, pricing has to be up there. There's no doubt about it. And it's also good in a healthy market to have pricing at different tiers. There should be a world where a $47,000 bottle of Irish whiskey exists and an $18 bottle of Irish whiskey exists. Those two should bookend And maybe they can go further, maybe there can be a $10 bottle of Irish whiskey and a $1 million bottle of Irish whiskey. That's a great sign of a healthy market that allows you to grow with it, if that's what you want to do, or it allows you to identify and attract those at the different price points who will never buy at another price point except that one. Where I think we're getting stuck, or where I think consumers are having trouble, is when it feels like something is off. In other words, it doesn't seem that rare, it doesn't seem that exclusive, it doesn't seem that old, or it feels counter to what was being charged historically, or I supported Sonny Malloy's this year, and now next year you're charging me this, I'm upset. That's where I think it's hitting. And the only way that's going to change is when whiskey brands don't sell out at the price point they go to market at. And Brian Redden's got a great point there about secondary market pricing. So 10 years ago, 5 years ago, there wasn't a single whiskey auction site in Ireland. I think it's only 4 years. 4 years. Irish Whiskey Auctions is 4 years old, right? So we only have Irish whiskey. We only have auction sites 4 years in Ireland. So it's only in the last 4 years we started to see the movement and the secondary pricing and the creation of a secondary market that up to then only existed in kind of Facebook groups and on illegal websites. That too has created some interest in collectability. So it's a curious thing, and I don't have all the answers on that first piece, which is why we get so upset about pricing. But an interesting word came out, I think I mentioned earlier, on Sonny Malloy's website or Sonny Malloy's Facebook page, talking about their release. And they said, they used the word collectible. This is the collectability of this whiskey. So they're factoring in the secondary market in their pricing. They're saying, if we release this at 300, we know it'll be on Irish Whiskey Auctions next week. If it sells out for 500, we want some of that. Now, another thing to factor in is when it says $500 or 500 euros or 595 euros, just know that the venue gets the smallest piece of that. In fact, anybody except the government gets the smallest piece of it, because for every litre of pure alcohol, 43 euros, 67 cents goes to the government. 43 euros for every litre of alcohol, pure alcohol, goes to the government. 43 euros, one of the highest in Europe. 23% goes in value-added tax on top of that to the government. So you could have a scenario where you've got 40, 50, $60 of a bottle is going to the government. Now, when you get to $500, that's less of a problem, but $100 bottle, $200 bottles, those are big amounts. So taxing is a big thing. And Sonny Malloy's isn't making all this money. They would have bought the cask, or they would have collaborated in a way where they make a per bottle price on all of this. But saying that, there is still a margin, obviously, that they're making. And the secondary pricing for collectability is a hint and indicator that that's why it's priced that way. So I'm seeing ads all the time for cask purchases for collectability and investment purposes. Bad idea. If there's a middleman involved in encouraging you to invest or collect Irish whiskey, you should run a million miles in the other direction as fast as you can. So that's the first point I wanted to mention. The other thing I wanted to talk about was with pricing is, while some pricing can go up based on rarity and based on lack of supply, we also see releases where there are thousands, tens of thousands of bottles released at a massive, massive price point from brands that maybe don't have either the collectability or the emotional connection with the end user. So when you have old, rare whiskies, you've got a high price point. When you've got young, new, inaugural releases, you've got high price points. Killowen's inaugural release was priced relatively high. Lakeview Estate, Maurice O'Connell's inaugural release, relatively high. Shortcross Whiskey, Redemon Estate, inaugural whiskey, priced relatively high. But they are inaugural releases, and they will always be more expensive than everything else because they'll never again be a first. Now, hopefully prices go down after that, and we've seen that they do. So these first releases are expensive. The old releases are expensive. But even with these first releases, they can sell out because they have emotional connection. Like Killowen, there was a waiting list around the block 10 times for Killowen's first release, even though it was a high price point, but it was their first release. Emotional connection, people are bought in, they believed in what Brendan's doing. Similarly, I went to James Fox's website earlier. Lakeview Estate already sold out. Morris sold out his whiskies that were 195 euros a bottle. I also see expensive whiskies selling out. Dunville sells out their single casks relatively quickly. Redbreast sells out They're dream casks like that. And those can be 700 euros a bottle. They sell out like this. The problem is when brands come out with no emotional connection, they're big corporations who launch super high price points. Nobody knows the people behind the brand. Nobody can buy into the process. PR agencies and social media agencies are tasked with developing the market. And let's be honest, they're not always in tune or aligned with the whiskey drinker. I can tell you that because I have run a social media agency, I've run a PR agency, and now I'm in the whiskey business and I've seen both sides of it. They're not always in tune. And so I think we're going to see more high-priced, corporate-led whiskies fall flat on their face. And that's a sad thing. I don't want to see that happening, but I think we're going to see it happening because I think some of the pricing is not based in reality. It's not based in reality. So I think a Redbreast 27, it is based in the reality that there isn't much more 30-year-old stock available to be vatting together to create Redbreast 27. It's got to cost that much. It has to. And there's nowhere else in Ireland that you can get anything older than a 10-year-old pot still. There's only one, well, you can get maybe 12-year-old pot still elsewhere, but that's it. There's only one other place, and that's Midleton, so they have exclusivity, and they got rarity. Brian says, I don't think anyone minds paying for quality. The perception of gouging is an issue. Yeah. And so there is that issue too of the price increases. So the price increases that have been passed on in the US across the board, those are significant. Like $100 on a bottle of Redbreast 27 is big. It's big money. Now we're seeing free market capitalism at its worst/best. In other words, a brand recognizing that the demand far exceeds supply. Let's increase the pricing until we meet the wall. And that is a thing in business school that they teach you, which is if you have no problem selling all your products at a certain price, keep increasing until it starts to become a bit of a barrier. And then you know where you've reached, you know how elastic your pricing is. There's for and against that approach too. For and against it. Okay. Tony says, I agree with that totally. New liquor wants a premium price, and most of the time it's not even their own juice. So that's another issue is, can I go and buy Great Northern Distillery matured whiskey for $8-9 a litre, put it in fancy packaging and sell it for $150 a bottle? I can try. And if I've got a route to market and I've got enough people who believe in something else other than just the costs of the whiskey, perhaps I can. But this is where I think it goes back to a point I raised earlier, which is I don't think that the pricing of whiskey is purely about age. And I don't agree with people who say, I would never pay that for a 12-year-old. I can get an 11-year-old price. I'd never pay that for a 12-year-old. I can get a 25-year-old for the same price. It's a bit like whenever you see, I was looking at something earlier today. I don't know how I came across it, but on my feed on YouTube, you see these people doing like apartment tours in New York. And this woman is doing a $3,500 a month apartment tour in New York. And she's showing her 1-bedroom apartment. Looks nice, small, New York's expensive. And the comments are, of course, to be completely expected, which is, did you know that for $3,500 in Arkansas, you could get a mansion? Well, you could, but she didn't want a mansion in Arkansas. The reason she's in New York is because she wanted to be in New York. And so it's a bit like you can't compare an Arkansas mansion with a New York 1-bedroom for the same price, nor can you compare a 3-year-old whiskey at one price or at the same. You can't compare age statements on whiskeys and assign pricing you believe they should be based on their age alone. The reason is, and we had this conversation with Maurice O'Connell, because there are now great 3-year-old whiskies on the market. If there's great 3-year-old whiskey that's worth paying more for, then if we're happy enough to pay more for a great tasting whiskey, what does it matter to us whether it was aged for 20 years or 3 years? But we get to decide that, not the brand. When the brand puts out the price is an invitation to purchase, isn't it? That's what the lawyers amongst you will tell me. It is an invitation to purchase. And if we don't purchase it, they won't sell it, and then the next release will be something different. So I think it's quite interesting. Brian says if brands have to weather weak periods, they can just as fairly reap strong market positions. So the flip side of the what we might perceive as, oh, there's a lot of money in the market and brands must be making a lot of money, is you now have distilleries paying 5 times more for energy, oil, electricity, gas than they were a year ago. Who's going to pay for that ultimately? It's not going to be the distillery because they can't. It's got to be us. So we're going to feel the effects of this in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time, in 4 years' time, when all those costs get baked in, or energy prices might not go down, or somebody can't switch from oil to renewable energy. Somebody can't put a solar panel on, can't put a wind farm in their back garden, is completely reliant on Eastern European oil or wherever it is, North Sea oil. That's going to be a problem for us as well. So pricing is something that I just wanted to talk about as a discussion, because I'm fascinated by the seemingly emotional reaction to really high pricing. And I think it deserves more of a conversation than they're gouging us or they're taking advantage of us. For example, when there are legitimate factors like the taxation, supply costs, supply chain costs right now, rarity, etc., I think we should weigh those up. And also the emotional connection, the brand value that's attached. We all know like the value of the brand Coca-Cola is worth more than the products. So the brand value of Cologne is high. It allows them to sell a bottle at a higher price point for a younger whiskey. The brand value of others might be lower in the estimation. There might be less equity with that brand in our minds if it's a large corporation that we don't know the people, or we sense that you're just repackaging sourced liquid, writing a really, really compelling or cutesy story about the whiskey, putting it on your website and hoping that'll do the trick. And throwing in a few shamrocks and a few historical stories, or calling up Fionn O'Connor and asking him for, can you reverse engineer your whiskey into a story or a history that maybe is located, is to do with that place or something along those lines. To be discussed. There are, so interestingly, I spoke to a few brands in Dublin this week at the Whiskey Awards who have said that they're moving away from the United States as a primary market for growth because of the costs of getting their stuff to the United States. I'm not going to name the names of them. They'll share what they're doing themselves, but a couple of brands have said they're making other European countries and even further afield, Asia and Africa, markets in Asia and Africa, being primary growth markets instead of the United States, because it's just so difficult to get product to the United States and deal with the logistics of the 50 states and the 3-tier system. It's very difficult. So the costs are there, but the benefits aren't maybe being seen by all of the brands. Just know there's not a lot of money in the whiskey world for small brands. There is not. And the big boys have the economies of scale, and they've got the distribution deals, and they've got the giant purchasing power, and they had the ability to hedge their bets. And when they saw things coming, they were able to buy all the bottles, and they were able to buy all the corks, and they were able to buy all the labels. The small guys weren't. So there's a cost to being small that the big boys don't have to stomach as well. And I think we should be conscious of that. Am I talking about craft whiskey brand? I'm not. Brian says that all this requires thought and discussion. It's much easier just to bitch on social media as a knee-jerk reaction. I agree. Look, again, we can do whatever we want, but to me it's interesting, and maybe some of you find it interesting too, but I find myself on both sides. I'm a consumer, as you can see behind me. I buy whiskey, and I now make stories and help make whiskey for a living in collaboration with other whiskey brands. And so I'm seeing all of the sides of it now, and it's, for the first time, it's becoming clear to me than ever was before. And so I want to share what I'm hearing and kind of share when I hear a thing or what's a topic that's being discussed a lot, or something that's worth pursuing for us. So we'll share those as we, but still, in the meantime, continue to complain on social media. That's what social media is for, isn't it? Andrew wants to know, is the discussion about managing consumer expectations or explaining producers' positions? Okay, well, I for me, it's not about me explaining the producers' positions at all. I think it's about discussing both sides in terms of what should we know as consumers and what should brands do as producers. And I'll give you an example of what a brand should do as a producer right now. And that is, I see so many new whiskey brands that want to hide behind a label design and a PR agency. And the PR agency, I can tell you, hasn't a clue about whiskey, hasn't a notion. And I know that many marketing companies and social media agencies, and again, in my former life, I ran marketing companies, owned marketing companies, and I was like the rest of them. We hired young interns often to manage smaller tasks. We had senior people who would do other jobs, but you can bet that as jobs came in, more of the jobs trickled down to junior people who were expected to level up very quickly. But it meant that younger people were handling jobs they were ill-equipped to handle in certain circumstances. And I'm seeing that in the world of whiskey, where there's a disconnect between the agencies that are being paid a lot of money to promote a brand and the consumers who are really the ones who are going to fund that brand. And what I say to every brand that I have the chance to have a conversation with is step out from behind the label, step out from behind the brand, and start sharing who you are. Start sharing the stories, whether it's on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or wherever the cool kids are hanging out. If I don't know anything about you, or I can't build an emotional connection with you, I'm less likely to spend my money with you. And we are irrational consumers. We don't buy logically. We never buy logically. So we're irrational to begin with. So don't hire someone to convince me of a price point. Instead, make an irrational proposition as to why I should spend my money with you. JJ Corrie does a great job. Louise does a great job of connecting with us via social media, sharing stories from the farm, doing a little video of her rack in the rack house, emptying putting a whiskey thief into the barrel, filling a glass, talking about it. Other brands do great jobs as well, engaging with online forums, online communities, yet others run into the distance and just write checks to the PR companies. So my recommendations to whiskey brands, I've got two of them. One is connect with individuals through personal content and personal one-to-many conversations where you can use social media to talk to many people in a personal way. And the second is, every time you have a whiskey release, show us and tell us why it's important. How many times is a whiskey released and we know nothing about how it was made? We're asking online, well, what is this white port cask? Every brand could just take their iPhone and they could go to the warehouse, or they could go to the tasting room, or they could stand in the parking lot, and they could take the whiskey bottle and they could say, hi, everybody, I'm here with our new release, and it is 3 years old, and it's spent 2 years in this cask, and here's where I chose this other cask, and here's why. And put that video on the website, put the video on your social media, put it on the label of the bottle, put a QR code so that I can understand the thinking, the reasoning, and maybe meet the person behind it. Those are two simple things I think brands could do to allow me to connect with them more. And I'd like to see more of them do it, because when I connect with them or you connect with them, we're going to spend our money with them. It helps. Mark says, it's so true. The Meet the Maker events really want you to spend your money and support these companies. Agreed. Brian says, one of the reasons Cologne and Two Stacks and JJ Corrie have so much traction is because they're transparent and not hiding behind contrived marketing. 100%. 100%. So they need to build relationships, and it's not as difficult as it may seem, but it is intimidating because it's not everyone can step in front of a camera. Not everybody that wants to. It's not everybody. Not everyone's in. And look, let's be honest. Not everyone is in the whiskey business to connect with us. Some just want to make money, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we're not interested. I'm not interested. I'm not interested. If I knew somebody was just had contrived marketing, buying sourced whiskey and labeling it up in something it's not, and telling us some story about how, I don't know. I run the risk now of starting to say things that will instantly connect you with brands. You'll be like, I know who he's talking about, so I won't say it. But just contrived marketing that some people will fall for, but us ruffians couldn't possibly fall for, and we want to run away from, to be honest. So I think that's my rant on pricing. Honestly, I hate how expensive whiskey is. I hate it. Now, so that is my position. I don't care how much whiskey brands charge, but I hate how expensive it is. Those two things can exist at the same time. I get to decide if I pay the price, but I hate how expensive whiskey has become, because when I first started into it, it wasn't this expensive. And so again, those both sides of that coin, I think, can exist at the same time. No, we're not, Brian Riley, on that point. No, we're not. We're not. Brian says that Lauren is a reason he's bought bottles of Bushmills, and Sarah is a reason he's purchased bottles of McConnell's. So there you go. Don't we all want to know who we do business with? Why? Because people buy from people. Isn't it lovely when we go to the restaurant and we know John, the manager, or we know Dave, the owner? We say, hey, Dave, good to see you again. And Dave's like, hi, Barry, come on in. Usual table. We feel special. We're irrational creatures. We want love. We want security. We want attention. We want, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Let's not forget that before we ever get to pricing. Slap a shamrock on the label and say Ireland's finest and go is the plan for too many brands, says Brian Sharp. Yes, it is. It is. And if an Irish person went to a supermarket or a grocery store chain in the United States, they wouldn't recognize some of the Irish whiskies because they don't exist in Ireland. And what most of those whiskies are blended Irish whiskies, 40% ABV, bourbon barrel aged. And they are 95% corn, grain, and they're 5% malt. That's what most of the supermarket, grocery store blends are for Irish whiskey. And look, there's a market for them. There's an absolute market for them. But they're not going to be the ones sending me a press release saying, Barry, would you ever talk about our whiskey online? The Wolf Tones didn't send me a press release either. I somehow came across it on a Google alert or something for the words Irish whiskey. So there's a market for everything. But I think if brands want to achieve more money for their whiskey and sustain their operations and help them fund their operations, appeal to our emotional side. So, Andrew, that's a very long answer to your question about are we trying to set consumer expectations or present a brand's position. I'm the one kind of in both sides of it now, right? I'm trying to set expectations for pricing in our whiskies for the club, but I'm also a consumer saying, listen, can we get more of this and less of that? Can we get less of that and more of this? I feel like we're dangerously close to the length of a lock-in. I refuse to sing. I will not be your singing, dancing monkey. We sing in person. Okay, so we are 2.5 hours in. Oh, Whiskey Bus. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the reminder. Whiskey Bus. You won't like this. You won't like what I'm going to tell you. The Whiskey Bus update is this. Anthony and I talked this week, and we are both 100% in agreement that we would like to do another Whiskey Bus. 100%. End of year has been tremendously busy with pre-existing bookings, events, undertakings, projects for both Anthony and I. And we have not been able to sit down for long enough to take all the learnings from Whiskey Bus number 1 and apply them to Whiskey Bus number 2. Whiskey Bus number 2 will happen, but I can't commit to the date right now. So we've talked about everything from March to August and everything in between. And we have a list of all of the feedback which you graciously gave us, those who were on the bus. Fantastic ideas. We will make lots of changes and enhancements based on your feedback. We will add in more things that weren't even part of the first trip. We have other suggestions from others who weren't on the Whiskey Bus. We have suggestions on time of year you think is best to travel. Many of you have made international trips to Ireland in the past. You know when it's busy, you know when it's expensive, and you've made some suggestions to us based on that. We have all that information. So we are going to get back together very shortly in the next week or two and talk more about it. And we both have a broad kind of map of where we want to go drawn out. And we both agree that we will start again in Dublin, but this time we'll head south to Cork by and do things on the way to Cork and have longer periods in places. So that is our goal. And we have there isn't a day that goes by that there isn't a mention or a thought of the whiskey bus. Like there isn't a day that goes by. So we know it's a thing. And this is the point where Kristen will offer her help, which we will say thank you. But it's not, there's no one can move this further along than me and Anthony right now, only because we have to take what we did and we have to repackage, and then we can get help. And there has been some great offers from help from a couple of you here online, which we will certainly avail of when the time is right. So that's where the whiskey bus is at the moment. It's a fantastic idea. Let's be honest. If I wasn't running the whiskey club and doing events and podcasts and all these things I have signed myself up for, I would focus 100% of my time on building a whiskey travel company. That's what I would do 100% of the time. It's interesting to me. It's fun. It's exciting. You meet really nice people, and you get to give back to the country you came from by bringing people in to enjoy it and experience it with you. There's nothing more fulfilling. So it's a disappointment to me and Anthony right now, collectively, that we're not 100% focused on this. For no other reason, only that other focuses had priority. And you wouldn't respect us if we ditched things we had committed to in favor of this, because that's not who we are. We keep our words and we see things through. And I want to do business with Anthony and work with Anthony. I don't want to do this with anybody else. And it sounds like he doesn't want to do it with anybody else, because we're both of the same mindset that you come first and we want to build it for you. And we don't want to offload this to anybody who doesn't think the way we do. So we're not going to give you a half-assed, half-baked whiskey bus. We're going to give you the best whiskey bus. So we're going to do it. It's going to come. And you're right to keep pushing me and prodding and poking and holding my feet to the fire on it, because I'll keep at this, and I will do that until we get this done. All right. So it's coming. It's coming. It's coming. And I will give you as much as advance notice as I possibly can. I absolutely will. Months. All right. Months of notice, because I know how hard it is to travel from the United States. I know how little vacation time the United States offers. And I know that you've already got plans. Some of you have plans. I've got messages from some of you planning trips in 2-3 years' time. So I get it. I get it. Steve says, August is European holiday month. Lots of things closed because everyone's gone on holiday. Not in Ireland, I can tell you that. We're only opening up for all the tourists. We could do a monthly whiskey bus, Jeff. There's no doubt about it. Like, we know the market's there. It's not it's actually one of the rare circumstances where it's not a problem filling the bus. It's executing to the level that would befit the name, the whiskey bus, and Anthony's name and my name. So that's what a glorious problem to have. The market's there. There's people ready and wanting to put in their deposits. We'll get this done. We'll figure this out, and it'll be we've learned a lot from the first one, so it'll be a different whiskey bus. It'll be an evolved whiskey bus in the best way, taking everything into account. Cheryl says we need a 2025 whiskey bus for the Midleton reopening. Whiskey Bus of the Month Club. I also don't know. So if we think about all of the amazing things that happened on the first whiskey bus, there are certain things I don't know how they could be repeated. And that's okay. They don't have to be repeated. They can just be wow, that was the inaugural thing and that thing was done for us. That's amazing. For example, I see little hope in rocking up to the wonderful Lauren and Alex at Bushmills once a month and saying, will you fill another cask for us? Will you fill another cask for us? Will you fill another cask for us? Maybe, but and look, anything is possible. But I think there's ways to make this amazing. Like, what if there were ways where there were certain add-ons if you wanted to come together and buy a cask, and that you went and filled it together? So things like that. Or if you're buying from distilleries now, that they kept your stuff until the whiskey bus came around to them next year, and we collected it and gave it to Anthony to ship home. Like, all these things, like, make it so personal, so cohesive with everything else we're doing. Like, all of those things are possible, I think. Whiskey Live is in May. There's also a lot of whiskey festivals that are happening in Ireland over the next year. None of them would work to be part of with the Whiskey Bus. And I've had the discussions with the Whiskey Festival organizers, because most venues that host whiskey festivals in Ireland, like whiskey festivals where they're in pubs and things like that, couldn't take 35 Americans just rocking in, because now you'd fill up the entire place. And while they're trying to fill their place, most whiskey festivals need a kind of a range of attendees, and they're targeting local people as well. So the whiskey festivals, while not aligned with our Whiskey Bus, the way we're structuring it, are things that you could do if you're going to Ireland at a different time. So in the next 1 to 3 weeks on the Shebeen, I'm going to share with you a list of the whiskey festivals taking place in Ireland that I recommend. And when I say I recommend, they're the ones that I'm going to go to, or I'm going to support through either hosting of events, like helping them MC some events, or attend as a consumer, or sponsor as Stories and Sips. I'll tell you the ones that I'm putting my time and money behind to promote Irish whiskey, and I'll share them with you. And those could be ones that you might add to your own calendar. Some of you have trips already planned, so that might be helpful for you as well. All right. So we've covered everything. We've covered pricing. What else have we? Pricing, Ohio event. We drew our winners. I've got the list of winners here. I'll email all of those. Joshua Atzert, Caitlin Herbin, Jessica Corvez, and Brian Riley. Congratulations to all of you. Do we like the format on YouTube? Do we like it being in one place? Is this, I kind of like it. I like everyone in one place. I think it keeps everyone together. It's easier for messaging for us too if we just say go to YouTube. Go to YouTube. One place. Better crack this way. All right. Okay, one place. That works for me. YouTube it is. We'll send everyone to YouTube. More reliable than Facebook as well, yeah. Even though I think it is more reliable. And I think the sound is good, right? Like the video quality is good. So I'm using, for the first time tonight, my new camera. We've got new lighting, new camera, new lens. Look at that blurring, the bokeh at the back. And then, like, you can see how it focuses. It tracks my eyes. So no matter where I am, it'll find the eyes. Better streaming, says Tony. Yeah, I think the quality is good. The sound is good, hopefully. So we'll keep at it here on YouTube then. So this will be where we'll do our Shebeen. And tomorrow, so within the next 24 hours, you'll see the details of our JJ Corrie collaboration for our club members. And then in maybe another 24 hours after that, we'll have another ballot for our Blackwater dirt grain whiskey samples as well. So we'll work on all of that and bring you some updates and send you emails. So stay tuned, and and we'll be good to go. Brian said he liked the video where it lost focus and went for the bottles. Yeah, so I was testing the new lens on my old camera, and the old camera for some reason thought that bottles were eyes or something, or the tops of the bottles were eyes, and I kept focusing on the bottles and not me. This one should have no issue. In fact, I could be running fast and it would track me like it's a cinema camera. So this is kind of Netflix quality, like Netflix would accept production made on this camera. So we should have no issue there. Jason Thornton tuning in from Australia, thinking he can just tune in and ask for an old triangle on the Shebeen. No, Jason Thornton, where have you been for the last few hours? There's some new rules in place. There's no singing. I'm not bleating at 3:00 in the morning Irish time and waking the house anymore. This is the sacrifice we have with the Shebeen, is that we get a live stream. We get to come together every week, but you lose out on 4 hours of the drinking. You get 3, and you lose out on the singing. This is what's called a negotiation. And in a good negotiation, everyone loses something. So that's it. All righty. I'm not wearing. Listen, are we going to devolve our very elevated discussion into what I'm wearing below the level of the table? We are not. I can tell you that. I'm not showing you my very fancy grey slacks that can also be used to work out. No, I'm not showing any of those things. It's over. We did our Shebeen, our second Shebeen, episode 2 of our Shebeen. If you missed any of our last 2 hours, 49 minutes and 29 seconds, you will find this on YouTube. And I'll send out the links and post them on our social media. And it would be nice if you tell people about this. It'd be lovely if you shared, copied the link, shared it, posted it on your Facebook page, posted it on your Twitter, posted it on your WhatsApp, MySpace, wherever you hang out. I don't know where the cool kids are, your TikToks. And get more people to join us. We like a growing community of like-minded people. It's nice to see every now and again you get kind of a few new faces come in and join us, and they quickly either get the crack or they run screaming into the distance and we never hear from them again. But either way, it's nice to keep growing, keep our club growing. So thank you, everybody. And we'll talk to you over the next few days, next few hours. I'll get some sleep before I get the JJ Corrie stuff up and running. And good luck with the ballot. Thank you all for the support. As always, Sláinte, best community in the world. Sláinte to all of you. Thanks for joining. Thanks for staying so late. See you soon.